Happy Saturday, SMITE fans. You are watching the SPL, powered, of course, by our friends at Alienware. Check them out online at Alienware on all the social media. That's Twitter and Instagram at Alienware. And then SMITEGame.com/Alienware. And you can use code SMITEAW if you want to grab some discounted Alienware gear of your own. So thanks again to Alienware for powering us here in Season 8 of the SPL. My name is Dolson. Gormizer joins me for day number 1, though, of what is the new refreshed group stage look here in Phase 1, Gore. And yesterday we had this post-game show. We separated everything out into a couple of groups. Now everyone in these groups are going to play each other once. So here's the separation that we have. Atlantis, Leviathans, Olympus, Bolts, Titans, Valkyries in Group A. Scarabs, Warriors, Dragons, Kings over there in Group B. And despite being the number 1 seed, Gore, I might think Group A is a more difficult group.
Yeah, it's one of those things. The Valkyries are such a wild card, you never know. But the Titans and the Bolts have been giving a lot of trouble. Granted, the Scarabs have been giving people a lot of trouble lately as well. Maybe not quite as much as the Titans. But I do think you are right on that. Group A feels like it's going to be a little more difficult here. And we get to see a lot of that one. I think that there's going to be some interesting matchups. Specifically, this first one, the Leviathans, not necessarily, I don't even want to know if the word is struggled. They kind of dominated Game 1 yesterday versus the Scarabs, and then Games 2 and 3 were a lot more competitive. I'm wondering how they'll do against a team like the Bolts, which I think is going to give them even maybe a little more trouble.
That's right, a heavy hitter matchup to be sure, and that's really what Group A is, right? You have this wild card team, the Valkyries. You don't know what team is going to show up, but then kind of a top 4 matchup standings-wise between the other 3 teams here in this group every time they play one another. So the Leviathans, after a little bit of downtime, we got to see them play already here this weekend, Gore, and they look good. A slight struggle against the Scarabs in that set, win all 3 games, but in the games that the Leviathans won, they looked pretty consistently strong, and this guy was at the forefront of it here. Rongyu playing like one of the best, if not the best, supports in the league at the moment.
Hell, I'll even continue on what you were saying, which is just very simply put that even in their loss yesterday, they looked strong. It was just a fumble at 28 minutes that really resulted in things going lower. And like you said, Rongyu right now feels so difficult to control. One of the few people that you have to ban this Yemoja against. I mean, this Yemoja, like, not even focused or really prioritized that much yesterday. I think it was banned by the Scarabs once, picked by the Scarabs once, but he was going for a lot of Sobek. But then Game 3 came around, and you could hear the knuckles crack as it got ready. I think this is just one of those picks and one of those players that you have to be really worried about. A lot of people have touted Rongyu as one of the best, if not the best support in the league.
Yep.
And I think trying to control the support play here is the secret to trying to control Yarkor, maybe the secret to trying to control Shinto, Panatom, and Julio as well.
Well, Rongyu at the moment, or PBM, at the moment, is the assist leader in the league at 152. Rongyu just behind at 149, but one less game played than what PBM had to play. So you talk about assists per game, and Rongyu towards the top of that category, if not at the top. Rongyu joins us now for the pregame interview prior to going up against the Olympus Bolts. Rongyu, the way that these groups shaked out, you got the maybe the lowest, quote, seeded team in the Valkyries, but you also got paired with a couple of the other top 4 teams that you guys have had to go against. So it's a very difficult group, but is that anything that concerns you guys? Are you feeling confident regardless of the teams that are in your group?
Yeah, I think we're feeling pretty confident. Like, if we gotta be the best team, we gotta be the best teams in the league.
Right.
So we're pretty confident in this group, to be honest. Win or lose, we wanna just play the best SMITE.
You've already beat them all once, right? So no need to feel anything but confidence. Technically, you've already done it once. It's just doing it twice. You are going to be going up against the Bolts today, though, and they have kind of constructed themselves into a weird area where Haddix has become a really big problem. Same thing, I think, for Jake, their front line. How do you think you and Julio are going to deal with them? Like, where exactly do you put the pressure to make them suffer?
Well, I feel like the Bolts have been improving since week 1, because week 1 they seem pretty lost, but now they find their playstyle, and I think we are concerned at that. So we'll just try to put our pieces and try to win the game.
Are you at all concerned, Rongyu, after the incredible performance you put in yesterday on Yemoja, 4-1-7 in the final win of that set over the Solar Scarabs? Is there any world where you think maybe this Yemoja starts getting banned out against you and you're going to have to go to something else? Granted, you played Sobek a couple of times, so we know the God pool is plenty deep for you. But do you think there's a world where you start getting this Yemoja banned out against you?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much PBM told my gold pool, I think, when we faced him. But I think Jamoya is just a broken god. Like any support in the league can play it. You can just spam your two and you're going to be like impactful in team fights. But yeah,
Sure.
we'll still see some interesting events, I think.
Agreed. Well, hey, it's a very strong god in the hands of one of the best supports in the league here at the moment. Rongyu, thanks for sitting down with us, and best of luck in your matchup.
Thank you.
And now, Gormizer, we have to look at the opponents for the Atlantis Leviathans today. And admittedly, this is a team, this Atlantis, or this Olympus Bolts roster is one we were concerned that some woes from season 7, that some issues with that Renegades roster would carry over here into season 8. There have been a couple of stumbles as far as losses go, but all in all, it feels like this Bolts team has gotten their feet underneath them and figured out how to close out these games that are somewhat contested.
I've definitely seen some ghosts of Season 7 still occurring, right? Every now and then you'll see it. Like, I mean, the week they beat the Dragons, right? They looked really good against the Dragons. They played the Kings later that week. And whether it was the Kings playing really well, the Bolts not living up to standards, one or maybe both that came through, it didn't quite click the same way there. And that's what I mean when I say the ghosts of it, where it's just every now and then they don't even look like themselves even. They just look like a very pale comparison to what they're capable of. But I think what we've been seeing a lot more consistently lately, especially yesterday, 3 games in a row, was a very well-rounded team and a very capable team. I have to say, hi-rez has worked his way into this team beautifully. We've got to see Lazbar on this Gilgamesh a couple of times and kind of going more towards what these Circuits, these Gilgameshes, like more setup-oriented gods, just to try and get that, I want to say, presence felt from him, where it's not the kill counter that necessarily matters for him, it's him setting up someone like Venenu or Bera to have it, and I think that really works well for this team. 2 kind of hybrid carries, we even got to see Venenu play the Chiron yesterday, like, there's a lot of fun they can have, and I think that wiggle room in their draft style is going to be what really gives them an edge, and could set them up and kind of trip up the other teams.
Gora, one thing you kind of bring up there, and one thing really that the pros have brought up here, so this is maybe not so specific towards the Bolts, but just league-wide in general. How sold are you on this Gilgamesh out of the jungle? Because we've seen Gilgamesh, but it's been exclusively out of the jungle, if I'm remembering correctly. You know, some good games, some bad games. You need more data on it, but what's your initial reaction?
It seems like something that we're going to see often-ish, but not dead set every game, not first pick every game, right? Like it is one of those picks that I think is going to go hand in hand with certain jungle styles, and I think that Lazbra has that style of play. What we've seen him play Nemesis yesterday, he loves playing Circuits. He's very, very big on these kinds of picks. In fact, just looking specifically at their jungle picks, Circuits, they're most picked up, and that's something that he really loves to go towards. But I really like the fact that even with Tsukuyomi, his Nemesis, all of his others, his Hunbats, there's a lot of carry potential in the junglers he brings, but at the same time, he is the kind of player that is looking for setup. He's not going to, I mean, I'll use adapting since we just saw him in the SCC, right? He's not going to go 10-2. You know, he's not going to be exactly what you expect, like hard carrying the game. He is going to set someone else to do it, and his success does pivot this entire team.
And Gora, I think that jungle matchup, very important here today, really across the board, going to be very important. Each individual matchup in this one, and one that my eyes go to as well is the mid lane matchup, because talk about a resurgence. Venenu, admittedly, in a couple of sets last year, kind of faded away into the background in a few of those sets, where you're wondering where Venenu was at times. I would argue this year in Season 8, whether it's himself, the rest of the team, or a combination of the both, Venenu has been playing absolutely well, and the Zhang Kui game yesterday notwithstanding, he looked good in that set up against a very formidable opponent. So I think Venenu versus Shinto suddenly becomes such an interesting matchup to look at. You can already see that reflected in the bans, the Giannis taken off of one side, the Raijin taken off of the other. And then I asked Rongyu if he thought the emoji was going to start getting banned against him, and the answer is yes, 42% ban rate across the league. We'll add a little bit more to that here with a ban in game number 1.
I'm really curious to see the Leviathans and how they prioritize, specifically Ymir. Like, support's getting controlled here. Ymir was something that was really high prioritized. Banned by the Bolts 2 games yesterday and then first picked by them in the last game. So I'm wondering if that's something that the Leviathans, I mean, they definitely would have watched, especially going back and knowing that that's a team you're going to have to face. You want to do a little bit of homework on them. But is it worthwhile, and do they think they can control it? I think that's kind of what's going through their mind, especially a second pick, things like this Tiamat, whether or not you want to ban a Gilgamesh and, some of these other top bans and picks, Athenas, that are still available. It kind of makes sense that you have to shuffle around and figure it out, and it feels like, at least for the Bolts right now, that Rongyu is concern number one. He is the guy that you need to control, whereas the Leviathans so far have been targeting mid.
Well, Goro, when Rongyu's playing the way that he is, definitely makes some sense why you see a couple of bans head towards him. Now the Leviathan's in an interesting spot where there's still a lot left on the table that we know Jake can play if we want to keep our eyes towards this support matchup. Sobek comes to mind. Fenrir was a pick that Lasbra I wouldn't say knocked it out of the park, but didn't have, zero impact on the game. He made his presence felt on that Fenrir yesterday, so I think a worthwhile ban, maybe from the Leviathans, and the first overall pick will go to Sobek. So now, Gore, you got Yamoja, Ymir, and then a Sobek is an effective ban up against Rongyu. You can tell where this mindset goes. Lots still open, though, for this second wave of picks. Leviathans now still in that support pool, have plenty of options. The Athenas you mentioned still there. Instead, Kilcullen will be first taken overall, a popular pick amongst the solo laners thus far here in Season 8.
Athena still being there is kind of scary to me. I mean, I'm looking at it, Cerberus Terra that has come through, not often, but sometimes, I can't think of many reasons to pick anybody over the Athena. I was just going through what have the Leviathans played. That's an easy pickup for them, I think, especially in this kind of matchup. Whether or not they get to run it the same way, what did we see a match with Medusa yesterday? I don't think we're going to be seeing anything like that maybe out of the Leviathans, but I do think that this is going to be something, especially with the Kilcullen alongside it, that's going to dictate a lot of pace control. And look, if you're worried about Rongyu setting things up as Yamoja, and Rongyu setting things up as Ymir, and Rongyu setting things up as Sobek, Athena should also be theoretically following the list, because she is so good at taunting people in and initiating fights that I think this is going to work out really well, especially with the playstyle Yarkor brings. I think in the duo lane, I'm just seeing aggression. Like, I mean, you look at it, their eyes will just be red with blood. That's all they want. That's all they're going to be chasing, and they're a good team to do it.
Athena saw some changes as far as damage goes, but still saw some play in a couple of our matchups here this weekend. Taunt still such a valuable asset. I mean, that's what Erlang Shen uses for his ultimate. Granted, there's some extra ability weaved into that there for Erlang Shen, but you get a taunt on cooldown for Athena, that sure does feel good. On the other side, Serket and Hercules now taken for the Olympus Bolts, so you'll find your front line and your jungler locked in already for the Bolts. They'll leave their carries a little bit further down. And how about this, Gormizer? A Merlin for Shinto. And there are a couple of mid laners in the league where you don't question this at all, and I think Merlin for Shinto is one of those, and I think Venenu on the other side as well. So a bit of a pick/ban situation here with the Merlin, and a good pickup overall.
Now, looking towards what they're drafting for the Bolts, they were very happy to go Chiron Soul, so I'm curious what Leviathans are going to pan out here alongside this Morrigan to try and limit it down. They picked a Zhang Hui yesterday. I'm going to go ahead and compartmentalize that in my brain. Like, I'm going to keep it there, and I'm going to have him ready, but I'm not sure that's the route we're going to see them go too often. I just think that this is the way the Bolts have always gone for their drafting style, and something they're going to have to start thinking about. They love going for, like you said, their front line and their jungler first. And while they're trying to limit and kind of take shots at both God pools here, I feel like both Bara and Venenu are going to be pretty happy after this ban phase, because they still have quite a few good picks that are open for them.
Yeah, still lots around. So one final ban now for the Olympus Bolts, and the Daji taken off the table. So Gilgamesh is still around here, Gormizer. I think that was a cat that I saw sprinting in there behind Barracuda. I wasn't sure. It was a very quick blur, but causing chaos, I'm sure, nonetheless. So still needing a hunter are the Leviathans. They'll take the Chiron for themselves. This is a pick that has seen a lot of play early on here, Gore. And what's so interesting about this, look, up against the Sobek specifically, I think the changes on the 3, the knock-up immunity, important in that kit. But I feel like that's all that got changed about this god, right? I mean, I don't know what took so long for Chiron to start seeing all this play, but in the recent matchups, it started to find some success.
Look, sometimes you need a little sprinkling of a reminder. I think that's what I consider that buff to Athena, right? When she was given a little damage on the taunt, where it's just like, she's already good, but in case y'all guys forgot, here she is. Chiron's in a similar boat, but there was also a lot of item changes that I think are really kind of heralding him forward. Bluestone has been a big starter, like we've been seeing the fight between Bluestone and Ornate Arrow, as well as the fact that, admittedly, with some of the nerfs that came through, it feels like his kit's better. That cleanse is so good, and when I see Sobek, Serket, Hercules, now Zhonghui, Medusa, two picks I will admit I didn't expect to see, I think Chiron's cleanse is going to come in handy a lot throughout this game.
Wow, Zhonghui and Medusa, a couple of picks that had seen some level of priority, but maybe not all the success in the world. A couple early kills for Cyclone Spin weren't enough to get that Medusa wildly effective there in the game the other day. Nemesis locked in here. As Gilgamesh hover there just for a moment, but it's a Nemesis locked in for Panatom. So Gormizer, now you see all 10 picks locked in here. Cucullin, Athena, Merlin, Chiron, Nem, and you seem to agree here with the final pick for the Leviathans.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Like Hercules, Sobek are all tanky. Zhonghui's kind of inherently tanky. Serket, we've seen how Lasbra plays this jungle. He's going to be building maybe slightly bruiser, but also he's playing setup. Nemesis is going to be really good at shredding any of those picks and really facilitating like Merlin, Chiron to be the carries. I think the Leviathans have a team that plays to their strengths and also beats out some of the strengths of the Bolts in like a rock, paper, scissors match. We also got to see, like you said, the Medusa yesterday maybe didn't live up to it. My biggest issue with Medusa is always that her one escape is something that is pretty easily body blocked, and so something that I think that they're not going to struggle too much on the side of the Leviathans, maybe keeping Barra in trouble. And Zhonghui didn't really, like he's had 3 games, he's lost 3 games. I think he looked best yesterday, but admittedly he hasn't been the end-all be-all. I feel like the Bolts have something going on in their minds that, and I think it could be a very interesting and intriguing win if they are able to pull it out.
Yep.
But the Leviathans are doing exactly what everyone says they do. They're playing their game, they're playing it with the drafts that are at the top, and they're making it look good in the process. I think that their draft, at least on paper, feels like it should outplay the Bolts most of the steps of the game.
Right, interesting and intriguing. That's a good way to look at it. You got to use your brain in this one if you're the Bolts. You're Medusa oblongata, if you will, and that is a mispronunciation of the correct body part. I want to give myself brownie points for that one. Thank you very much, the Olympus Bolts.
10 out of 10.
Give you 10 out of 10. Remember, we didn't mention it up to this point, but you need to be in the top 3 of your group in order to move on to the Phase 1 playoffs, and you play each person in your group just once. So every matchup, very important, including this one, Olympus Bolts, Atlantis Leviathan, starts right now.
Thank you, Dave and Gore. It is Agro and Mifflin bringing you the kickoff game of the SPL group stages, and boy, is it a doozy. Leviathans and Bolts. Mifflin, these two teams, their stock has been rising over the last few weeks, particularly the Leviathans, of course, as they are our #1 seed, but the Bolts as well, coming off a big win yesterday up against the Tartarus Titans.
Yeah, it feels like the Bolts, as the weeks have gone on, have really started to solidify the identity that they're bringing as a team. No longer are they fumbling around the neutral objectives like we saw in Season 7, and instead, it's been a much more methodical style from them. But what better test than up against the first seed, man? You want to talk about methodical? I mean, you look it up in the dictionary, it's going to be a picture of the Leviathans.
They just do it the same way every day. They come in, they punch their card, and they go to work. And that usually ends up in a victory, and they're staying at home with this draft. I mean, this Yarkor Chiron has looked so strong, not just in his hands, but across multiple different players in the SPL over the course of this week. Feel like that Chiron stock is rising, and this is our second opportunity to see Medusa, and my God, Mifflin, it happened again. They just get this instant lane pressure. Yeah, he doesn't have benevolence. You're right. So he ends up getting level 2 alongside Rongyu, and it ends up being instant lane pressure, but this time, Barracuda and Jake at least managed to escape with their lives.
Yeah, it seemed like they were privy to it, the Bolts. They knew that aggression was coming. The second that Jake was in range of Rongyu, my man slammed his Sunder key, just saying, please don't step up. I know your level 2's nuts. And it works out generally all right. Jake able to maintain his HP bar, does lose out on the majority of his potions. Just about 1 left available to him, or 2 rather, on this Sobek. So he's going to play pretty safe in the near future, whereas Rongyu was already forced back to base.
Bera and Jake managed to secure the Alpha Harpy on this left-hand side. On the other side of this Chiron is this Medusa pick, and I don't know about you, Miff. I'm not particularly sold on Medusa quite yet. How do you think she stacks up against some of the other hunters?
It feels like we've got a slight overreaction to some nerfs, right? Why was On Her so popular just 3 weeks ago? Is it really just that ult cooldown that made him fall off the face of the planet to open the door for Medusa to come out? I think she has potential, but she's not on my short list for hunter picks.
No, I don't think so either, though, of course, you and I, maybe an extra affinity for Medusa coming from our box days, particularly against you guys. You know, we knew that Air Cougar didn't have a high enough sensitivity to turn around to the Medusa ultimate, so that's why we picked it so often. I'm sure you were sick of playing against it by then.
Yeah, leave my man Tristan alone, all right? He has not touched Smite in like 3 years. He's going to catch Shade on the first day of the group stages.
Hey,
all right,
that's
look.
world champion Air Cougar, okay, for the record. I'm putting respect on the name, but maybe he could have played on a higher sensitivity. That's all I'm saying, okay? Lasbra immediately into the enemy side of the jungle, looking for the red buff invade, but decides he'd rather go and group up with the squad after getting that red buff down, not deterred by the potential rotation coming in from Panatom as Venenu is hovering this left-hand side. Funny enough, Shinto is not coming this way, as he's a little bit too low on mana, but even without their mid laner, the Leviathans able to defend the purple.
Yeah, nice small little rotation there. You better think that Shinto isn't going to rotate to the majority of these side lane fights. He is a dude who just loves to sit in lane and soak up farm, be that late game powerhouse and hit late game a little bit sooner than everyone else because of all the farm that goes his way. But I'm liking this strategy from the Bolts to utilize the pressure that Surcat brings throughout the early. Lasbra is able to essentially one-shot camps at this point. That's the strength of Surcat, the power farm the jungle, and get involved the second he ticks over to level 5, which is why we saw them try and shift their pressure over into that purple buff. Unfortunately, though, Panatom, privy to it, was able to get it for his team.
Little surprised that Lasbra gets his hands on this Surcat pick, as so many teams have seemed hell-bent on keeping it out of his hands, but seems like the Leviathans feel like they have the plan, potentially just outscaling it with this Nemesis in the jungle for Panatom. Nemesis, one of those gods that saw play even with Shell having the block stacks, but I think really becomes unlocked now that she gets her full auto attack damage off whenever she's diving in.
And the shell change being that once you have that HP shield, nowadays you take 50% damage from all auto attacks rather than the block stacks coming through. That is in the most recent patch. Look, I think Nemesis is a god that is going to be pretty meta resistant or nerf resistant just because of the nature of that Retribution ultimate. Being able to strip away defense, by and large, just a pretty good thing to do.
Rongyu the first target, Sunder after the pluck, and no shot. This Athena survives. Venenu claims first blood, but it was the front line of Jake and Lasbra setting it up.
Rongyu stepping a little bit too far forward there. Not even sure why he's up that far. Had he found even a 3-man taunt, there was no one in range to follow up besides Shinto, and up against 3, that's not enough damage this early in the game. Bolts trying their best to find that purple buff invade yet again, have a decent advantage this time around.
Jake getting poked out enough by Yarkor to maybe make him respect this rotation coming in from Panatom. No ultimate available for Lasbra, and no blink for him either. Probably going to be enough to send the Bolts packing, and indeed it will. This Athena pick for Rongyu, I mean, she's a top ban through phase 1, 82% ban rate I think I saw coming into this set. I think teams are starting to experiment, though, Miff, with letting her through. I mean, no ban here from either side, of course. And the Bolts had the opportunity to take her first overall, but elected for this Sobek instead.
Oh, like, crazy to me that teams are willing to experiment with it. I mean, Athena, for my money, still one of the best, if not the best support in the game right now. The second she takes over to 5, that global presence as well as the engage factor come late, so strong.
Yeah, Venenu not wanting to be there anymore. I mean, Lasbra does not have a whole lot of backup for him, but Ven still wanting to play up. Bullied Shinto a little bit, but then immediately killed by the Nem and Athena ults. And this Nemesis pickup in relation to the Zhong Kui, Zhong continues to get picked, despite not finding a whole lot of success when we've seen him. Must be a scrim monster based on it. Go back to that in a minute. Blink taunt onto Barracuda. Beads are there, and the pluck is good from Jake in order to try and peel him away. Yarkor focusing Barra, while the rest of the team looking at Jake, means that both end up surviving, but Beads on cooldown now for the Olympus Bolts Hunter at the very least. When you're thinking about classic counter matchups, Mifflin, Nem into Zhonghui, about as classic as it gets.
You get that additional defense from on Zhonghui once you go into that ultimate state. Well, that means that's just more defense to strip away and give over to Panatom the second he ticks over with that Retribution. That is the age-old matchup for Zhonghui. And Zhonghui's a god in Season 8 that I really did not expect to see. Itemization has not really screamed Zhonghui to me inside of the mid-mage lineup, but it's been seeing a lot of play. Must be a script monster, as you said.
Shinto going to use the beads as he got plucked and sundered. And Rongyu, oh, why don't we just turn on this guy? We've got Last Breath ticking, and Lazarus going to be able to pick up another kill. Bolts up 2-1 right now over the Leviathans, and both kills on the Leviathan support.
But despite having the kill advantage, it's still the Leviathans getting aggressive in solo. Haddock steps up to the blue buff and pays the iron price. Unfortunate circumstances lead to his death, and the Leviathans maintain a slight gold lead.
They're in a good position. Panatom with a slight level advantage over Lasbra, despite Lasbra's kill participation being 100%. Panatom also at 100% kill participation, but has both underneath his belt. Ends up being a little bit more favorable for him at the end of the day. And when we're thinking about where this Nemesis is going to be, that right-hand side, Hercules oftentimes so difficult to lock down and kill, but Nemalt makes a huge difference in stripping away those protections and slowing him down. Of course, he has the driving strike, but that's really the only mobility that he has. And then, of course, with the Zhonghui, waiting until he uses his ultimate, gets all those bonus protections, and then stripping them away for yourself feels really, really good. I love this Nemesis pickup for Panatom.
It's just going to work out, and it's so easy to combo off of. In the late game, it doesn't even matter if it's Haddix or Ven getting taunted in by Rongyu. A taunt into Retribution should just spell death for just about anyone. It could be Jake in the late game, and all of a sudden the bolts are going to be without an initiator. It could be Barracuda if he somehow stands the ire of Rongyu. It's just a strong composition that the Leviathans have brought for their late game team fight. But now both POIs are being revealed on the map. Pyromancer going to be spawning very soon, as will Gold Fury. Gotta think it's going to be the Bolts going in first. Right now, they have a team fight advantage, especially around Ven.
Don't have a lot of objective damage, though. Certainly more team fight damage through the Zhonghui, but not exactly the guy who's going to burst down or secure the objective, or really DPS it that well, frankly. Zhong, much more of a team fight type of god than an objective type of god, whereas the Leviathan should be able to do objectives fairly quickly between the Merlin and the Nemesis. Nemesis on the higher end of objective DPS for assassins. Chiron on the lower end among the hunters, but don't think Medusa's really out DPSing him by that much. So blue buff invade once again. Haddix got it last time all by himself, but then paid for it. Julio plucked in. Big knockup from him. Haddix's boulder doesn't find a whole lot. Then immediately in trouble, but tanky enough on the Zhonghui to survive the onslaught. Rongyu again on the receiving end of Last Breath, and this time he's not feeling quite as bad about it. It's a double kill for Panatom, and the bolts nearly come up empty-handed. Venenu's dot eventually does the job onto Rongyu with a nice backstep into push by Haddock. Still not enough. Leviathans coming up 3-1 over the bolts.
The Bolts getting aggressive in the enemy jungle yet again. The Leviathans using that reactive style to make sure that these buff invades don't go their way. And so far, the fights have been going the Leviathans' way. It's just that reactive style that we come to associate with them back in Season 7. Seems like here in Season 8, we haven't seen too many opportunities for them to use it, but they're still certainly capable.
Counterpunching perfectly so far, particularly Panatom, who is just playing this game at such a great pace. Level 11, 3 levels up on Lasbra.
Nice.
Now, 4-0-1 for him. And Serket is one of those gods that you'd think, you know, oh, she goes in support sometimes. She can operate on low farm, and certainly she can. But if you're going for these hybrid builds out of the jungle, normally you'd see full tank out of Serket support. Something like Warrior Tabai in Chile, you're so squishy, and you really don't deal that much damage anymore. Lasbra's going to have a hard time being effective from here.
Yeah, from here on, I think Lasbra should shift up the build to be a little bit more damage-centric. When you're behind, defense means a lot less than when it does when you're ahead. You can usually utilize it if you've got a level lead, just maintain that aggressive playstyle. But from behind, well, no matter how much defense you build, you're still going to fall pretty easily.
Well, his damage not too bad. Takes about a third of Yarkor's HP, but Yarkor giving better than he got.
Yeah.
There's the ultimate coming in. Masterful shot not needed. Panatom gonna grab it with the last tick of that shield. 5-0-1 now for the Leviathans jungler. And everywhere Lasbra goes, his shadow seems to be right there in Panatom.
And what a great time to find that pick. 4 stacked on the Leviathans on the Gold Fury. Already dropped down to 50%. Jake and Ben have the flank.
Taunt on time in order to let the Leviathans secure, but it looks like they want to disengage. Bara here at a good position. Yarkor not quite as lucky with his positioning. Jake no blink, so it's going to be hard for him to catch up. Petrifies there for Barracuda, but now his dash is down, and Panatom has yet another meal. Shinto going to claim that one for himself. Venenu caught in a bad spot as well, and when it rains, it pours. Ven actually going to turn it around.
Uh-oh.
Excuse me. Sorry, sir. Zhongqi still good in those moments. Ven finds 2 from the grave, including a massive shutdown on the Panatom.
That is huge for the Bolts, man. Barracuda dashes in initially because he knows, all right, if they get Gold Fury here for free, that is such a massive loss to us. So it's immediately we see the Olympus Bolts try and get something back in return. Unfortunately, it cost Barracuda his life for not too much in exchange, but Ven making the hero play, able to pick up 2 on the tail end. And that is the strength of Zhongqi. When you don't have that final judgment available from the Nemesis, when he's not around, well, Ven's just a tank.
Easy for him to put out that damage and withstand it. I mean, the Merlin damage usually takes a little bit of time to go off. It's not necessarily big burst damage until the late game, and even then, you're not looking at him like you would a god like Ra or Scylla that can really chunk you out come late game. That slow DPS is exactly where Zhang wants to be, particularly with the lifesteal that he's built, Mifflin. Purple boots and that soul gem end up mattering quite a bit here.
It really does. That additional lifesteal just keeps him alive long enough, man. The 3-man stun as well to line up all of his abilities. Look, Ven played it as well as he could have. It's not often that you get to have that much recourse once you've been taunted into 3 members alone, but Ven never once let go of his keyboard, never once gave up, and is able to keep his team afloat. But it's still a steep hill to climb if you're a Bolts fan. 4,000 gold behind, 13 minutes in, and no Gold Fury available. Even if the Bolts do win a team fight, it's going to be very hard for them to find an objective to close up that gap. For the next couple of minutes, both teams can rest on their laurels, but the Leviathans are going to be benefiting.
Feels like this is the exact type of composition where you don't want a Nemesis to get ahead of you either. We already covered how well she counters gods like Zhongqi and Hercules. But if the game plan is to kill tanks, which it often is when you're ahead, it's the easiest way to continue to grow your lead is just to make sure that the enemy team never has engagement on you. Taunt into Nem damage, into Merlin damage, those feel pretty difficult to play against. Jake finding that out right now as he eats more than half. Julio right on time. Panatom going to slow down Jake, but still has that lurking in the waters. Just a little bit shy on the damage department. Julio now caught underneath the tower thanks to Lasbra, but he's going to beat and dash away. Leviathans don't find any blood, but pull a lot of resources from the Bolts.
They do strip away the ultimates from both Lasbra and Jake. Sunder goes down as well, but the majority of relics are going to be maintained. Ven expends the Aegis, and that's about it. Whereas the Leviathans trade out all of the relics on the side of Julio, 4 of their ultimates, and were not quite able to win anything out. But the Leviathans realize that they can go for these risky plays because there's not much risk on the map. Pyromancer is still not alive. Primal Fury has not respawned. Means that even had the Leviathans overcommitted there, even had they traded out some lives, 15 minutes in the game from behind, there's no world where the Bolts can go for a Fire Giant. Best case scenario for the Bolts, if the Leviathans lose that fight, is potentially a tier 1 tower.
Group it up and taking something, but as you mentioned, not a whole lot on the receiving end there. Even if the Bolts were to come out on top, of course, Leviathan's not likely to let that happen from this type of position. Check out the level disparity in the mid and right side of the map. 3, really 2.5 levels for Shinto over Venenu. That's where that Zhongqi doesn't feel quite as tanky to you anymore because you've got enough damage in the kit in order to chew through it. You got 2 levels for Panatom, a level for Julio, a level for Yarkor. Starting to separate a little bit in this XP differential.
Man, that's the Shinto special, though, isn't it? It feels like he's been
a
little bit absent from the team fight so far this game, whereas Ven has been all over the map. Doesn't really matter, though, if Shinto's just going to hit level 20 first, if he's just going to get his items online a little bit quicker, and the Leviathans are starting to hit that pace around the 20-minute mark where they like to group up and start forcing fights on these neutral objectives. Better believe it's going to be the Leviathans at this Primal Fury first, and the Olympus Bolts are going to be forced to make a hard decision. Do we want to step up and take a fight where we are clearly at a disadvantage, just at the off chance of potentially stealing away a Gold Fury? Because neither team really does have great confirmation, it would even fall down to a coin toss. Or do they let it go and wait for a more important fight, potentially around the Fire Giant in the next coming minutes?
No beads for Jake. He went for the upgraded Horrific. He's got both his relics upgraded. And as we mentioned, immediately towards the Primal Fury, down to half HP. Lazra looking for an angle in, but going to be difficult to do. Primal just gone. Panatom sends out a warning shot. Barracuda says, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that. And it looks like Bolts are willing to trade it. Primal Fury for Pyromancer.
But that's still, it slows down the bleeding for the Bolts, but it certainly does not stem it. The Leviathans come out ahead on that exchange. And now Fire Giant in the next 2 or 3 minutes, as the Leviathans decide to start heading that way, is going to become easier. They're going to deal a little bit more damage to it and take a little bit less from it because of the passive from the Primal Fury. The Olympus Bolts, for now, it just feels like they're trying to hang into this game. They haven't really dug in their heels, looked for any sort of engage or defense hard stuck for them. But at some point, they're going to have to take a fight. They're going to have to take it at that disadvantaged state, or the Leviathans are going to passively just continue pulling ahead.
Just don't feel like the Bolts have had wind in their sails for a little bit. They've been floating on the current that the Leviathans have set so far. That analogy actually works even better with the team name that the Leviathans have. Beads used by Venenu and Ultimate. As soon as that Sunder came out from Rongyu, he realized that that was a legitimate fear of dying, and Panatom gonna blink over the top of awesome Jake. Aegis there, good pluck from Jake, gonna save Venenu's life. TP coming in from Haddix, but really just as an insurance policy. Leviathans trade a blink and a Sunder for both relics and the ultimate of the Bolts mid laner.
Look, the Leviathans might as well just group up, force a fight right now. Ven has no defensive relics available. He's 4 levels down. Yeah, I mean, Shinto's level 19. To Ven's level 15, the Leviathans have a insurmountable advantage in this next team fight. Even the teleport from Haddix is expended there, so if he's forced back to base, that's essentially a TKO. Leviathans have so much space and room to work with here. I think they're in a position where they could go ahead and pull the Fire Giant and not have to worry about it. It's early in the game, only 19 minutes, but that's just the advantage that they have.
Yeah, I think that Leviathan's also smelling blood in the water. They're going to group up, not for the Fire Giant, to take down this tier 1 in mid, though I agree with you. I don't know if this is quite enough for how far ahead they are in the actual fight. It's not just about the golden experience, but as you mentioned, Venenu pretty close to a non-factor without that ultimate or any relics. But instead, they're just going to try and pick Jake, body block him out. Lurking in the water is certainly not going to be enough. And that Divine Retribution again comes through from Panatom and allows them to pick up another kill. 5-1-4 now for the jungler, and this could open up the Fire Giant.
It's just so simple. Athena taunt into defense shred is going to get you a kill, and it doesn't matter who it's on. That was the support. That is awesome Jake 408, who was immediately removed from the map. Leviathans use this time to back up towards the Fire Giant and generate threat. They do pull it, but keep your eyes on Lazra. He's got the flank, and the entirety of the Living Bolts are here for the defense.
And there's no one tanking this Fire Giant besides the backline, but Haddix is going to be the key right now. Buys some space, but Julio waiting for him on his eventual retreat. Rongyu going to turn and try and force back Lazra with that ultimate, and he does so successfully. A lot of blows traded, but not a lot of blood quite yet. Lazra might be changing that here. Taunted and killed by Yarkor. 2-0-2 now for the Hunter. Is Julio still in the thick of the fight? Blinking for Panatom. Barracuda going to have to dash away. Another good pluck from awesome Jake. Keeps Panatom at bay. Barra now beadsless coming into this next engagement.
Beadsless and without a hope if he gets taunted. I mean, we saw what happens to Jake when it happens to him. Yeah, Barracuda isn't benefiting from all that defense, but it just goes to show how the pace of this game has shifted since about the 6-minute mark, the last time the Bolts got proactive around that blue buff invade. Jake has gotten a ton of really good plucks, but they've all been defensive. They've all been trying to peel out for his team. We haven't been able to utilize this Sobek in an aggressive manner for potentially the last 15 or so minutes. And even if he does find a pluck in now, by nature of the Bolt's composition, it's not burst damage that's going to be following up from it. It's Zhonghui, consistent channel damage, or maybe further displacement from a Hercules punch. It's so hard to use a composition like the Bolts have from behind because you are lacking that traditional mage burst damage.
Definitely more of a war of attrition, but that's not what you want to do against a team who's pretty far ahead of you. Vera knows he's in trouble. No beads. Panatom likely to be lurking, and indeed he is, but Vera gonna smartly give up his position underneath the tier 1 tower. Gem of Focus is complete for Shinto. He's upgraded his starter already. Venenu still only level 17. Julio not going to be hit by that Cobra's Kiss, but to be honest with you, Myth, I don't think it would have made a huge difference. Julio level 18 and awfully tanky.
Yeah, I think he just ate Haddix's entire combo, and wouldn't be able to tell by looking at his HP bar. Stonagaya outpacing the damage output of the Bolts so far on the right-hand side of the map. Yarkor able to strip away a tier 1 tower in the left, while the Bolts are distracted trying to make sure this Fire Giant doesn't go down. Leviathans, however, got their eyes on the easier neutral objective. Gold Fury going to go their way, and this gold lead is really starting to balloon out of control. 7,000 gold, 8,000 experience, 22 minutes in. I mean, we've been calling for it for a while now, but this is the traditional time to start looking at the Fire Giant, and with a lead like this, I mean, can't fault him. Leviathans can essentially do no wrong.
I mean, the Bolts just were disarmed early in this game. Their whole composition, as you've highlighted, just does not fight well from behind. And you look at how it's crafted, it's really designed to get ahead and then stay ahead. It death balls very, very well. Plenty of CC, plenty of damage when you're grouped. That tankiness there from the Zhonghui, much more impactful in the early game than in the late game. This Bolts roster was planning on being ahead, but I think Panatom almost single-handedly getting so many kills stopped that plan from working, and now have set the Leviathans up for great success.
Yeah, the Leviathans had really good ward coverage from the onset of this game, and it was an active decision for Panatom to not play his own match, but instead, wherever Lazar is, I'm going to be there. Lazar has to be the originator from the aggression throughout the early for the Bolts. This Circuit really does get off to a quick start, so all Panatom has to do is make sure he's there, make sure it isn't happening. And then fortunately for Panatom, he does a little bit more than that. He goes, what, 4-0 at around the 7-minute mark. Essentially 100% kill participation. Not even essentially, just straight up 100% kill participation for the Leviathans jungler. And from there, what are the Bolts able to do? From behind, they've got no burst potential, which is the traditional way to get back in. Now, it's up to Fire Giant steals or Phoenix defenses.
Well, it's low, and Haddix gonna come around the corner and throw one right down Main Street. The Bolts strip it away, and Myth, this was what I was just about to say. It feels like the Leviathans, they've had this commanding lead for so long, but it started to trickle down a little bit. It started their pace was slow, I thought, around the map, not getting quite enough for my liking. And even though that is a high percentage play for the Leviathans, the door is open at any given time, and Haddix, level 20, maxes out that Excavate, does as much damage as it can. That's really the best secure on the map, and he's going to be able to strip it away, and all of a sudden the Bolts have life down 6k with a Fire Giant. That's pretty even to me.
My man walked up slowly, pressed the 4 key, and it just worked. Just no defense from the Leviathans here. I guess they just assume that there's no way anyone does it. What is it, like 200 damage to confirm that one away? Look, that is gotta leave a bad taste in the Leviathan's mouth. This is how they lost a match to the Scarabs yesterday. And look, I mean, lightning doesn't strike twice too often, but if anyone's gonna do it, it's the Bolts.
Well done. We're really doing well on the name puns and analogies here today. We're getting the group stage off to a good start for sure. But the Bolts now in a pretty decent position. I mean, players approaching level 20. Haddix has hit level 20. Bought out a Bumba's Hammer. This is just adding in 80 true damage per auto to his combo. That ends up being pretty impactful, and of course reducing his cooldowns, which feels quite good. Venenu should be able to upgrade his Sands of Time pretty shortly. kind of wonder if it's going to be an alternate timeline on the Zhang Kui. If there's a god that can make it work, it might be him. The Bolts now grouping up and looking for this left-hand side, but Leviathan's not interested in fighting them if they're trying to trade out objectives, maybe even setting up a base race.
This is so smart from the Leviathans. They just have less towers to work through, so they're going to have the advantage state here. They have to strip away this Phoenix quickly, and if they do so, the Bolts are forced to back. It's 3 members backing, Barracuda sticking around. Leviathans are threatening the base.
They are, and Jake is backed, and Julio gets his back off, which is massive. Lasbra just couldn't get in there to stop it, but still, Julio back, not quite enough. Left Phoenix for mid Phoenix is the trade so far, but Lasbra steps up to clear the wave with no beads. Hello? Hello? You don't have beads against the Athena. That's what's going to happen. Pluck onto Panatom as he's been receiving that defender of Olympus, still willing to surge on forward, and Rongyu going to grab that one. Haddix's boulder still important, but not as much as that Fire Giant steal. All the while, Barracuda just getting chased down the jungle by Julio. And Leviathans now might be able to just turn around and pinch the ADC, but Haddix stepping up, trying to get the damage on a Panatom, but Venenu's ultimate does nothing that time around. The Leviathans looked like they might have fumbled the bag, but they end up picking it up at the very end, despite the miscue on the Fire Giant. The Leviathans find game number 1.
Man, that is a heartbreaking situation. Not often you get to look at a game where you're behind that long. And legitimately, the Bolts spent 20 minutes just waiting for one opportunity to find some sort of win condition, and they finally get it off of the efforts of Haddix, that Fire Giant steal. They strip away a Phoenix, and then Lasbra lets it all go in the very last inning to just lazily stepping up to a wave. That's all you can describe it as. It was a lazy play that cost them the match.
Very, very frustrating, I'm sure, for the Bolts, because you spend so long just getting slammed in this game, and then you finally get a good counterpunch, you got him on the ropes, and then your foot slips, and all of a sudden you're on the defensive. The Leviathans, got to give credit to them, really make that play happen. Instead of sitting underneath their Phoenix and just waiting for the Bolts to come to them, they force a mistake on the other side from the Olympus Bolts, and the Leviathans claim game number 1.
Really,
with that, of course,
tough.
Sorry, Mifflin, I kind of left you in a weird spot there. With that, we're going to go to a quick break as we head over to the analyst desk to break down game 1 and get you prepped for game number 2.
How you gonna lie when you look me in my eyes and you show me your facade? Show me your facade. How you gonna lie when you look me in my eyes and you show me your facade? Show me your facade. You a lie. You a front. You say anything long as you get what you want. Tryna play me like a fool, homie, I am not a clown. It ain't nothing but a game, cause all you do is mess around. Now I'm on the verge of a meltdown. Meltdown. I should've known when I met her back at Midtown, at Dogwood, when I was going through a rough patch, but it's all good. I even told about the dark times I had in childhood, when we was driving off of I-10 in Kirkwood. Now all that time I never get it back. You wanted that, used to hate when I didn't wanna hang. I noticed that, used to talking about your ex, Jake, with your next Jack. Used to messing with them white boys, now she went black. Wait a minute, guess you went and got yourself a real life. Got yourself some booty shots and lip filler. You just wanna make a rapper beat like Dilla. You ain't nothing nice, radiator, spinners up close. Baby, you a ghost, you a demon, and you should float. Get out the way and just go, and just go, and just float. How you gonna lie when you looking in my eyes and you say you down for the cause, but you really here for the ride? You ain't really feeding no sheep. You're a K9 in disguise. Shoulda never gave you nothing but a funky high five. I know we can't go back in time, but I wish I could rewind and get back all that money that I spent every nickel and dime. Cause you a lie. Oh, you a front. You won't say anything as long as you get what you want. Went and got yourself a new man. It ain't even been a month. I feel sorry for your boo, cause he don't know what he signed up for. Do he? Ooh, yeah, I heard that you met him at the bar, Louis. Okay, don't try to do him like you tried to do me, baby. You a cold-blooded killer like Stu. Cause up close, baby, you a ghost. You a demon, and you should float. Get out the way, and just go, and just go, and just float. Float like a balloon, apple, empty bottle, cork, styrofoam, and most dead bodies. You killing me, homicide. Look at your lying eyes. I should have been better laced, cause I failed too many times. If money the root of evil and you call yourself a dime, you gotta be penny wise, you gotta be penny wise. Cause up close, baby, you a ghost. You a demon, and you should float. Get out the way, and just go, and just go, and just float.
On my own, no fixer. I'm gon' ball, no picker. That I ate those, they live for. Talking on my back, go figure. Whole team eats fun splitter. Never was the one.
Game 1 goes to the Leviathans, and it's one that I think the Bolts probably feel like they let get away from them. And this is a matchup obviously very close on the battleground, but close in terms of color scheme as well. And if you're somebody who's debating which yellow and blue team jersey you want to buy, well, maybe this set will help you decide. Those jerseys, of course, furnished by our friends over at Insight Apparel Company. Shop.smiteproleague.com is where you will head to grab yourself a jersey, a hoodie, a t-shirt, all that sort of fun stuff. Cotton hoodies and t-shirts available now, if that's more your speed. So thanks again to Insight Apparel Company at shop.smiteproleague.com for furnishing all the apparel here in Season 8 of the SPL. And Gormizer, I hinted at it a little bit there. This is one that the Bolts probably feel like slipped through their fingers on a couple of occasions. It was never really fully in the Bolts' control, but there were some moments where they had a chance to get back in and didn't really take advantage.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of opportunities for them that, again, they had moments of greatness that came through. A really good Fire Giant steal at one point by Haddix, but it just feels, and I was telling you this as we kind of got into this, but that Nemesis pick just ruined everything for them. I think that they had a draft that could run a lot. Someone on Twitter had pointed out to me that the oldest god, or the youngest god, that the Bolts were playing with was 6 years old. So, like, they've all been in the game for a long time. And one thing that I think should be noted is that most of them suffer at the hand of Nemesis, specifically Zhang Kui. Like, she's one of the oldest counters to Zhang Kui, so that was already a matchup that wasn't going to go well. But just the tankiness, the way Lazara plays Serket and that style didn't feel like it would hit. And you had highlighted it coming in, but like Yarkor looked beautiful on this Chiron yesterday, again today, as well as Shinto on this Merlin is just such a classic pick that comes through that it doesn't feel like the Leviathans had really any big weakness in their draft, except for maybe objective secure.
And the objective secure here is what I'm referencing largely, in the chance for the Bolts to get back into this game, but fell by the wayside a little bit later. You can see Yarkor there on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, obviously feeling good about the way game number 1 went. Look, in a group as tough as this, and that's something we've referenced a couple of times here, where you need to win all of these games. You play every team in your group once, and the top 3 teams get to move on into the Phase 1 playoffs. So, if you're the Leviathans, beating the Bolts, before you have to get down to the Valkyrie, something like that just gives you so much of a good confidence boost moving forward. Gore, you look at the post-game stats here. Venenu had 11,000 damage for his team, highest on his team, and, probably middle of the damage charts for the Leviathans if he was on that side. Is it time to put the Zhang Kui on the back burner, or do you think there's still a little bit of life in that pick?
Man, I really hate... I don't want to say yes to that, because my mentality is that I think Zhang Kui has a place. I think it right now is just struggling to find that place. And unfortunately, because of the format, maybe group stage isn't where you want to pull him out. I don't think playoffs are where you pull him out. Maybe it's a Phase 2 thing. Maybe it is a little bit of a burner for a few weeks, maybe like a month or so, and then you do kind of bring him back in full force. But it's also probably going to be pick priority. I think that the Bolts could definitely lock him in a second pick position when he's in their bottom 2, where there's not a lot of opportunity to really reply to him, because that's what the Leviathans waited for. Their jungle pick, they love picking jungle last. They're going to, I wouldn't be surprised if they do it again. Looking at it yesterday, they had their jungle pick last in 2 of the 3 games, or at least towards the bottom in 2 of their 3 games. And so because of that, I think there's a lot of merit to trying to shift it around, play with the picks and bans to make it favor you. If I'm looking at anything, I'm actually putting more pressure onto this Serket. Like Lazara, we've seen it be great. I will give him a lot of credit there. But at the same time, for a pick that has been banned out from him more often than not lately, something that is one of the top picks, I believe, for the Bolts in general, it has to have a way better performance. He was the lowest damage in that game, lower than Jake, way lower, like over about 700 damage, I think, lower than Rongyu. I think there's some merit to getting a pick and performing on it the way we're used to.
I wonder where Cirquette will fall in draft priority here in picks and bans for game number 2, kicking off right here and right now. Remember, the big storyline, Gore, in picks and bans for game 1 was that Rongyu had to go to, like, his 4th pick or something like that. You know, you had the Emoja band out, you had Ymir.
And it was Athena?
Right, it was Athena, you're feeling good, then a Sobek gets picked on the other side. So I wonder if that trend continues here, if the Bolts still feel the need to put that much pressure on Rongyu. To fill in the blank on my own personal thoughts, I think you do, because you give Rongyu something like the Emoja, and you're going to be having a real bad time. But the first 2 bans, Gormizer, they remain the same. Raijin off the table, as well as the Giannis.
And this is where that conversation comes in. Look, Jake does not have a bad Yamoja, but Jake is not the kind of player I think that you pick Yamoja for just to get it away from Rongyu, so I won't be surprised if she's in the top 3 bans here for Bolts. I think that's just something they're going to go for. Jake is much more fluid and better. Like, he's just a better player when he's on things like the Ymir, the Sobek, that he can get aggressive on. Hell, he played tier support last year, and it looked great when he did it. And so that's the kind of thing I want to see for them, and so it's not surprising to see that ban come through. But the Bolts, in my mind, are going to have to change up a little bit more. Specifically, like, you're banning a lot of Ymir. They're the only team right now that has been banning it. Like, looking at it yesterday, they banned it twice against the Titans. No one else has really been looking at him. And I will say this, I don't think his nerfs warrant him falling down incredibly, like, out of the meta. I think that it's, 2 seconds max for all of his cooldowns on that wall, which is rough. It's 2 seconds that you're going to have to wait, but you can cancel it early. And also, it's still a wall, so I really like the adjustment to let him come through, because I don't think he deserves the ban spot as much anymore.
Right, I think that's a smart mindset to have there, Gormizer. I think not, maybe the ban spot up for grabs, depending on who it is that you're playing against. Still maybe worthy of a pick, and not even maybe, I think still definitely worthy of a pick. That's something Yarkor is happy about. All smiles over there for the Leviathans. 21 games played for the Ymir, 62% win rate, so has absolutely found success so far here in Season 8 of the SPL. Cullen, been a very popular first pick overall, and Athena as well for the Leviathans, a pretty popular pick when available. 94% pick ban rate, only a 44% win rate. But the Leviathans add a little bit to the win rate stat there in game number 1. Give it another chance here in game 2.
Yeah, this is the thing that's, I think, a little more skewed, because some of those Athena games are, we're looking at a lot of jungle games. There were some solo games. Like, we haven't gotten to see a lot of true support Athena, and I think, in fact, last game, I'd have to double-check this, but might have been the first of the year that we got to see her just being over there as a true support. Maybe we've seen it a couple of times here and there. But I think this is a pick that, like you had mentioned, Ymir gets locked in, and Yarkor seemed happy about it. I think that's why. They know that, yeah, Ymir's a great pick. I think he's a great support. I think that given the scheme of CC, Athena is a better engager. Ymir controls team fights a little bit better. Late game, I'm going to lean towards Jake. Great walls, great freezes, can really win games. We've seen it countless times. But a good taunt out of an Athena kills everybody if done properly, and that's where I like what the Bolts have done, kind of take away some of the strengths that the Leviathans had behind the Athena to make it so that she's not quite as powerful as she was last game.
Yeah, that's a good point there, Gormizer. Jake needs something aggressive. The ability to be in your face and wanting to be there is so important for a pick for this player, and the Bolts would be better off for it. Merlin, I think, a great pivot here for Venenu. In some of the resurgence that we've seen Ven have out of the mid lane, Merlin has been towards the forefront of a few of those games. So I think it makes some sense that the Bolts give that pick over to Venenu, as well as taking it away from Shinto. Now, something that Shinto has proven he can play very well as well is this Morrigan pick. And the more and more priority picks that roll through for either team, Gore, the transformation targets are absolutely there and become a little bit more frightening for the Bolts.
Even ban out the Gilgamesh, which makes me... Again, I think it's something Lasper's played really well, and it goes to show a lot of teams were focusing, like the Fenrir, the Cirquette, has been a big ban up against the Bolts as well, but I think you could probably replace it if we're getting the same Serket that we just got last game. I'd absolutely replace it with the Gilgamesh. But Chiron Merlin, it feels a little better for the synergy coming through, especially because last time it felt like it was a very easy blanket pick, right? Nemesis hit 4 of the 5 picks and made them all seem a little worse on the side of the Bolts. That is not going to happen here. You can say that pretty much with ease. Ymir, Chiron, Merlin aren't locked all individually down by any one jungler. And so I think this opens up the door for the Bolts to have a much better game too.
Agreed. I think that's a good mindset to have there as well. Daji continuing to appear for the Bolts in their ban column. I think pretty interesting, you know. She started to see this increase in play, and I think that's something Panatom has shown that he can play as well. Not something I'm used to seeing, admittedly, which is why it jumps out to me, but something that obviously these pros agree has started to hit its stride a little bit more. Sensing that Lasbra still needs a pick, the Leviathans will take away a pick that's been at the forefront of Lasbra's mind, and the Serket goes over to Panatom here in game number 2. A strong engage tool to work alongside the Cucullin and Athena.
You know, I was just decided to check it out and look it up to figure out what was going on. Serket, the Leviathans have played her 3 times up to this point, 1, 2 out of 3. Pretty good. That was actually Lasbra's first Serket loss. He's 5 for 5 on his Serket games going into today. So I guess unfortunate, unlucky for him overall, but not kind of showcasing that things aren't maybe as easy as they could be against the Leviathans. I think that one realistically was maybe some of the rest of the draft, something that they could go back to, but I like the fact that the Leviathans respect it that much enough that they still pick it. It's a good pick for Panatom, but it does also kind of feel like a 6th ban.
Well, you have a taunt for the Leviathans here, Gore, and the Bolts for Lasbra, feeling like they want to have an extra taunt on their side as well. So the Erlang Shen locked in, assuming it'll be the Osiris out of the solo lane then for Haddix. How about this 1-2 punch that the Bolts have drafted to round out their 5?
I like the Erlang because the setup that he can bring is just easy peasy, right? 1-2 punch that he's going to be able to have. The taunt, while it's going to be much far and fewer in between than an Athena taunt, it's going to be good setup and good damage. It's either going to lock down people with Ymir or provide easy damage setup for Chiron and Merlin. So good pick on that. The Osiris is the one that I'm going to keep my eye on, though. Look, Haddix has been playing out of his damn mind. I'm going to give him a lot of credit. Yep. Even in losing games, he's looked really good in the solo lane. So I'm excited to see what he can do with this pick. We haven't been seeing Osiris a lot. Bologna also just got a couple of nerfs, but like they're the more auto attack base. Like Osiris maybe more on the forefront because his kit can still do a lot of warrior things and has some anti-heal in it, a lot of fun stuff that you can work with versus things like Bologna, who's still tossed by the wayside. I think this Osiris could be a really solid pick for him, and I'm really excited to see the matchup versus the Cucullin. And I think, again, I'll say this from top to bottom, it feels way better for the Bolts going into this game than it did in game number 1.
Yeah, it does feel a lot better, doesn't it? And something that's interesting to me here, Gore, is the shifting nature of what we've seen out of Hunters here so far in the restart in Phase 1. And we've seen such a wide variety. Itemization has changed up just a little bit. We've seen some bluestone starting to get picked up. The arrow starter item hasn't been picked up as much. We've seen it a couple of times. Heimdall, Gore, maybe one of the most affected gods by some of the changes that we've seen. Do you think still in a position with itemization in order to, or still in a position with the changes to itemization that he can still do well?
I think he's still going to be able to do well. It is interesting to see how hard he has fallen from the top, although I think the Leviathans love, again, last picking their carries in their jungles, so they don't mind letting it sit all the way down there. His matchup versus Chiron, if I'm remembering at least this week, doesn't seem like it's been going well. Then again, nobody's matchup versus Chiron this week seems to have been going well for the opposition. Chiron's been kind of running the show, and Heimdall is safe enough, and I would argue good enough in this position that he'll be able to find a lot of interesting plays, but his knock-up's not going to be able to affect that horse when he's dashing anymore, and that's going to be a bit troublesome.
Well, Leviathans and Leviathans fans saying Bazinga after game number 1. Will we get a Bazinga after game 2? Let's jump in and find out.
Thank you, Gore, and of course, the world's biggest young Sheldon fan, Dave Dolson Olsen, for that wonderful death segment. Bazinga is the word of the day here, Mifflin, and for good reason. It's going to be a fun one, I think, here between these Bolts and Leviathans after what we saw in Game 1. Mifflin, hello. I miss you, buddy. Where are you? Is it because I said
Oh,
Bazinga?
am I in?
Is it because
Am
I
I
said
in?
Bazinga? Look, just because me and Dave, okay, really Dave got me into Young Sheldon. I don't like it.
You
but
watch
he's
Young Sheldon?
No, of course not. What I was about to
Well,
say
you
was
said
he
you do.
made me watch it. Dave showed up at my house crying because he had no one to watch Young Sheldon with. So of course I watched Young Sheldon with him. But I don't like it. It's just that he loves it so much that I want him to feel like he has someone to watch it with. And that's where I am on Young Sheldon.
And you know what? No one's ever going to accuse you of being a bad friend, Aggro, because that has got to be a painful experience. Not just watching Young Sheldon or watching anything with Dave. Just kidding. Absolutely love that guy. Olympus Bolts going to have to bounce back off of a tough loss, off a slight throw from their jungler. Leviathans running off a high of winning game 1. I think that we're looking at similar identities in team composition. This Bolts draft, to me, has to pull ahead in the early. Erlang Shen is a god that, if you fall behind, is so hard to perform on because of how close range he really has to be. So keep your eyes on Lazra. Expect him to try and get proactive early.
Yeah, but on the other side, Panatom with the classic Erlang Shen counter pick. Serket really thought of for a long time is one that whenever Erlang was at the top of the meta, you pick Serket, you shut down the healing entirely from his ultimate, you make that ultimate feel pretty underwhelming in general, and he has a hard time keeping up with all of that mobility on the other side, and of course no CC immunity in the kit for the Erlang Shen. Serket usually does pretty well into gods like that. We'll see how Panatom can pilot it as Haddix eating a ton of damage over here. And Julio, you're going to solo him and then stand there and go, okay, I guess you can walk up. Easy first blood for the Leviathans.
Just stepping a little too far forward, wasn't keeping his eye on that rage meter. Julio making it look incredibly easy. Haddix forced back to base, at least able to pick up the tier 1 boots for his troubles. No better item than just about 6% movement speed to help you out there. Julio going to be benefiting from a pretty large lead going forward. Someone's going to have to bail out Haddix, man. Expect Lazar to try and head over there and just try and stop this aggression from the Julio player.
Not an easy start here for the Bolts as we take a look at the replay. Haddix, look, the team always wants coup. Sometimes you got to tell them that you can't get it.
It's hard.
And this should have been one of those times. Beads a little bit too late, and there's some first blood action, rookie on rookie violence in the solo lane for Julio and Haddix. Julio coming out on top there in that one. And now the right side of the map, owned by the Leviathans for the foreseeable future. That's what Cullen does better than just about anybody. But instead of heading over to that side of the map, the Bolts happy to spend time on the left. This time Lazra gets in there and steals away the red, and Jake picks it up and immediately back over towards the purple come Jake and Barracuda, and really facilitated by this Ymir, another invade goes well.
This is something the Bolts have been doing consistently against everybody. They love going for that first rotation buff steal on the duo side. Go back about 3-4 weeks to a Zapman interview when he was prepping to play against the Bolts, and he said, look, this is what they're going to do. They're either going to try and invade me on my purple buff first time, and it's going to work, and they're going to win, or it won't, and they'll lose. Haddix in some more trouble, man. Julio picks up the second kill for his team off a rotation from Panatom. Look, the Bolts, they've said it. Haddix, you're on your own, man. We want duo lane pressure. It's about those buff invades. Haddix left alone on an island. He's going to be struggling for the near future.
And he goes with a reinforced Greaves as the boots choice. I don't know if that's what he would have gone if he was at 0-2 before picking up his boots, but I think that's why he chose it, at the very least, guaranteed that he's not going to be dealing a whole lot of damage anytime soon. He needs to worry about living first, especially when he's down a level and a half at least to Julio. Level 6 now for this Kakullen. Both kills in the solo laner's hands.
That is a tough situation, man. Haddix bought his boots first just because he was forced back to base twice before Julio deemed it necessary to head on back. Take a peek at that tower, Aggro. I mean, it's almost dead, and we're 4 minutes in. That is a double-edged sword. If Julio keeps up this pressure and takes out that tier 1 this early on, it will open the door for Haddix to just go ahead and isolate the wave inside the tier 2, force the Leviathans to step further onto the Bolt side of the jungle if they want to farm, something Julio's going to have to be cognizant of.
I wonder if Panatom is going to spend time on that right-hand side still, or come here to defend these buffs a little bit more often. So far, it's the latter coming over to defend, and Lasbra is going to immediately use the Purification Beats. Panatom on the receiving end, and he never even gets his damage off. Barra gets the first kill for the Bolts, and now Yarkor barely able to slip through the Bifrost. He escapes stage left, but Leviathans are running and scattered. This red buff almost certain to go towards the Bolts, and the purple buff should be there as well.
This is a good strategy for the Bolts here to maintain pressure where they're able to find their lead. Red and purple buff's going to be one way for them to remain afloat. But just got to think, man, Julio's going to rotate out of that lane eventually, and an incredibly large Kukulkan, that's something you got to be incredibly worried about. Shinto as well has been playing that signature Shinto style, has not even once attempted to defend a red buff or purple buff so far this game. Instead, has been focused on farming and is maintaining a level equity with his counterpart. Once he gets over to level 12, 13, this Morgan's going to be an issue as well. Want to see the Bolts try and shift their attention and start to slow down the farm of the Leviathans.
Take a look at those net worth charts, though, here, Mifflin. I mean, Julio's up 1,000 gold individually over Haddix. But the overall gold scheme is only about 500 in Leviathan's favor. That means that on the left side of the map, the Bolts are stronger in terms of net worth at this point in the game. It's really only any fight that has Julio that would be Leviathan's favored, and he's not on a character in Kukulkan that really wants to rotate this early. Kind of has to build up that rage, make sure that he's coming at the right time. Maybe he will now that tier 1 tower has fallen on the right-hand side, as Haddix has done exactly what you alluded to earlier, which is just let the wave come down and force the Leviathans into an overextended spot in order to try and get their farm. Maybe Lasbra could make a punish gank happen on that right-hand side, but honestly, I kind of like Julio's odds 2v1 at this point.
Yeah, but this might force Julio to go ahead and rotate out a little bit earlier than he would have otherwise. Doesn't want to step up to that tier 2. Rongyu caught out in mid, takes the shards of ice, loses out on about 60% of his HP bar. Here comes Panatom.
Dumps the whole kit into Jake, and Jake still standing plenty healthy. Double kill for Venenu. A second last breath, a bit of an oxymoron, and Jake still going, I got breath left to breathe. He's still standing despite the onslaught from 2 separate Circuit kits, and it's a double kill for Venenu. 2-0 now for the mid laner for the Bolts.
Red buff invaded as well, and Gold Fury now being looked at. The Bolts had a plan. It's duo side pressure inside the jungle, and it's starting to pan out for them. Gold Fury going to go their way as well. I was thinking maybe Julio was going to out-rotate Haddix as he doesn't want to step up to the tier 2, but it's actually Haddix who makes the rotation first, making his team benefit from the additional member now. 900 experience, 300 gold in favor of the Bolts. Leviathan certainly still in this one. We need to see more. In particular from Shinto, it really has not been able to get involved so far this game. Sure, you can say he's the Morgan, needs a couple items under his belt, but really, you want to utilize that ultimate a little bit earlier on. That Changeling turns the Morgan into a much earlier game god. Doesn't have to be Panatom. Could easily turn into Julio, who's massive right now, or into Rongyu for the global presence. Want to see Shinto just get a little bit more involved.
Yeah, that Circuit transformation definitely did not do quite enough for him onto Awesome Jake. Just a lot of cooldowns dumped into a Ymir that is awfully tanky already. Tank boots do that for you pretty much all the time, especially when you've got this much itemization up and ready to go, and the levels in this good of a spot. Panatom doesn't have the escape available. He used it on the Oracles. Good recognition from the Bolts, and Jake gets to claim that one this time around. It's Venenu who did a lot of the heavy lifting, though. 2-0-1 on this Merlin pick, and this pick for Ven has looked so good in recent games that I think that's why everyone's so confused when he keeps going back to the Zhong Kui when he can do this on the Merlin.
Yeah, and I am confused, for the record, on why he keeps going back towards that Zhong Kui. Zhong Kui been played by Ven and Paul so far this season. I think we got only one win on an incredibly low win rate. Look, when you got Merlin like this, might as well continue to lock it in. The Olympus Bolts essentially own the entirety of the left side of the map, and it seems like they know it. Jake stepping forward, peeking towards that red buff, but Lazar a little bit slow on the rotation. This is going to be the second red buff of the game that goes the way of the Leviathans.
Still, that's an important one. Stops the bleeding a little bit on this left-hand side, lets Shinto pick it up, maybe allows him to be a little bit more aggressive in the coming moments. The Bolts last game the wind got taken out of their sails pretty early. Panatom got very far ahead. Lazra fell very far behind. But that's not the case in this game. It's been much more even between the junglers, and the Bolts actually have a slight lead so far in this one. Do you want to see them up the pace from what they had last game, or do you think waiting around is the right call?
Bolts need to maintain the pace they've been on, that aggressive style. Erlang Shen is going to have a much harder time getting involved the later this game goes, because with the build he's elected to go for, he's going to be relatively squishy. 9 turns Blessing gives you a little bit more effective health, which does make you slightly tankier, but it has a pretty bad matchup up against Serket. Panatom should be able to shut that one down. So Lazra, for my money, is essentially on a timer right now. Might as well utilize him while he's strong.
Quick flicker there from Venenu keeps him away from Panatom's blink. It's exactly what you want to do up against those engaged junglers, and now Panatom, a little bit harder for him to find the ins in this fight. 0-3 for him. Of course, he does have the 1 assist, but certainly a different story than what we saw from him in Game 1.
No, Panatom was looking so much better at this point in the game in Game 1, but similar situations reversed when Lazar was put in this spot. He was, what, 3 levels down at this point, or 2.5 at the 10-minute mark? Panatom has been doing a decent job of at least maintaining farm in the jungle. He's sacrificed a little bit of that lane presence that we saw from him in Game 1, and instead has refocused on making sure he stays afloat. And now, only about a half level down on his opposition. Goes for a similar build inside the Anchile. I wouldn't be too surprised if we see Panatom elect to go for a slightly more damage-centric build from here on out, so that he can get involved and make sure he's able to shut down these backliners. But as of right now, the ball is in Olympus Bolts court, and Pyromancer being looked at. This is going to go down for free.
Julio is on the way, but I don't think he's going to get here in time. No, Blink does stop Lazra in his tracks.
Okay.
And now Rongyu is on the way with that defender of Olympus. Lazra, great double knockup and a double freeze coming from Jake. Bails out his jungler. Rongyu wishes he had that kind of peel. Venenu finds his 3rd in a row, but now under siege. Panatom trying to chase him down. Beads are there, but Last Breath is up and ready to go, but that won't be enough damage on its own. In fact, now the chase is on for Panatom. Ven claims that one over the wall before finally being shut down by Julio, who has all 3 kills for the Leviathans so far. Jake looking at him, but Shinto is the target for Barracuda. 7 now for the Olympus Bolts as they find another good fight in this game.
7-3 is the slash line, but again, the gold tells a different story. It's only 1,200 separating these two teams. The Bolts have been establishing great pressure on the map, have over double the kills and a gold fury over their opposition, but somehow the Leviathans have been keeping the gold tight. Experience a little bit of a different story, 4,000 in favor of the Bolts, but here's something that should create a little bit of separation. The Pyromancer pulled out, but just the presence of Rongyu is going to be enough to dissuade this one from going through. Feels like to me, the Leviathans are getting a little impatient here, Aggro. That chase was wild. Why are you inside the Bolt's speed buff? Why is Panatom trying so hard to close that gap? Doesn't even use the blink, just jumps forward, dashes forward, and does not have the damage output to finish off Ven.
Certainly the Serket has struggled thus far, and when your main transformation target for Shinto is the Serket, having the Serket be behind is doubly as bad. And we saw it play out there, where he just did not really get a whole lot of damage off on that transformation, then just dies for it on the back end. So not a great start here for the Leviathans. But as you mentioned, keeping it nice and close, and I think a lot of that credit deserves to go to Julio, who now has finished off his mystical mail. Talked a lot about his lead over on this right-hand side, but check out Barracuda on the left. He's all 15, the highest in the game. He's 2-0-1, and he must be sitting on a ton of gold, because there's no way he's down a full item to Yarkor, so he's likely to get a reset off soon. Yeah, he's got 3k gold. Wonder if the Leviathans, I mean, they know by checking the inventory that Barra hasn't backed and that he has to reset. Wonder if even with the deficit, Julio's there on that Gold Fury, you know Barra is either going to be weaker than he should be or resetting. Wonder if that should have been a Primal Fury pull.
It could have been, but this deficit is so tough to play into. Panatom's so far behind as well that I can't argue with the Leviathan's decision to look over towards that Pyromancer, but it's Panatom trying to solo it into a reset, gives the Bolts time to head back to base. Barracuda gets all the way back and makes his way into the Gold Fury. This is indecisive play from the Leviathans, not something that we see too often.
And Jake's going to punish him for it, too. Blinks in, no Pyromancer for you. Good wall. He
Wow.
does catch Shinto on the back end. Shinto holding the relics as the reinforcements come through. Blink, taunt. Shinto doesn't get the Aegis off in time, as now he's going to transform, but it's too little, too late. Lasbra's gotten that kill, but Jake made it happen. Another great wall coming from this Ymir, and that is awesome from Awesome Jake. That might be just a Fire Giant now for the Bolts.
A 15-minute Fire Giant that is back-breaking, man. And again, this all happens because the Leviathans couldn't figure out where they wanted to be. They had a 4-man grouping on the Pyromancer before the Bolts even started the Primal Fury, and instead they reset it. Panatom drops down to 20% PvE style up against a raid boss, the Pyromancer itself. Just indecisive, trepidatious play so far from the Leviathans here, and the Bolts are benefiting greatly now. 5,000 gold in the lead, Fire Giant on 5, 15 minutes in. This is world record pace, man.
Man, if you would have paused the game after Julio just got the second kill onto Haddix and told me that a team got Fire Giant at 15 minutes, I would have said, yeah, man, the Leviathans are owning in this game. Has not been the case, though. That has been the only bright spot for the Leviathans, is that right side of the map. You take Julio out of the equation, they are 0-8 elsewhere. Not such a good game here for the rest of the Leviathans, but the Bolts, on the other hand, looking fantastic. Lasbra revitalized on this Erdlong Shen pick. Venenu has set kill participation on 7 of the 9 kills for the Bolts, 5 of them underneath his belt as the last hits. And how about Awesome Jake on this Ymir?
Yeah, I mean, Jake on Ymir is a story that we've told plenty of times throughout the season, right? Not too much more we can sing the praises of. So instead, we can take a more macro view and see how this siege should play out. If I had to guess, the Bolts are going to go ahead and start their group up on the left-hand side, strip out the tier 2, potentially look towards the Phoenix if they find a pick. Barring that, they can work their way over to the tier 2 on the right-hand side. But the Leviathans aren't going to make it easy trying to find a pick.
Ben a little bit late on that Aegis. No shot. He survives this. Shinto going to use the ultimate as well. That's 3 ults to shut down Ven. And you know what, Myth? I think it's worth it, because the Leviathans are not winning any fight head-to-head at this point in their game. You just got to take what you can get. And if that's what it requires, if that's the investment necessary, then that's how it's got to be.
Yeah, that's the first time Shinto didn't turn into Panatom, and that's the first time Shinto's transformation hit pay dirt, isn't it? That Chiron transformation, so good for his team, turning into the level 18 Barracuda, benefiting from this Tank Shredder build as well. I want to see some more of that from Shinto, but doesn't it feel like a slight fumble from the Bolts here, Aggro? Why are they desynced on their grouping? Why is Barracuda and Jake up on the tier 2 alone, while the rest of the Bolts are kind of meandering on the map? It felt like, to me, a great opportunity for them to group up as 5 and force some team fights. And the Leviathans, they didn't have to work hard to find their pick. They just found Ven isolated in mid.
Agreed. The Bolts definitely not pushing this Fire Giant to its very limits, as you would expect. But now, beginning to group. Haddix on the way, as is Venenu. But of course, Ven, still no relics for a while, and no matter how far behind the Leviathans are, they have Blink Athenaton on their side, and a carry with no beads against them. So you think that they might be able to make a play happen if the Bolts overextend. The Bolts take care of one of the only 2 remaining towers. That leaves 1 standing, and it is the tier 2 on the right-hand side. Bolts not concerned with that. They're going for the Phoenix. Watch for Venenu's positioning. He is very far back in this one. Waiting to see where Rongyu is. Rongyu going to show up. Ven backs up. Make sure that he is not going to get Blink taunted.
And Rongyu does have that Blink available. Blink taunt into also Sunder as well. Should be able to strip him away. The engagement starts off, and it's Julio in first.
And he's got it back up coming from Rongyu. Shinto going to transform again into the Chiron and put some good damage out on the Bolts, but not good enough. It's Lasbra who's the worst for wear, but still able to stick around for now. Haddix going to tank up this Phoenix, trying to let Barracuda do it. Nice double taunt coming in. Barra no beads, but not enough follow-up damage coming. But it's Jake who ends up falling instead. Phoenix still plenty healthy, and Panatom does not get quite enough on that dive in. All being told, though, Mifflin, left side Phoenix still stands. I count that as a dub for the Leviathans.
That is a huge dub for the Leviathans. It's off the back of disciplined play. Even when the fight started to slowly start to eke in their favor, at no point did it seem like any singular member of the Leviathans was willing to step outside the Phoenix's range. Normally, in these all-in scenarios, we see teams get kited out all the way towards the purple buff, trying to chase out these kills, but not the Leviathans. They force the Bolts to fight in an artificial 5 versus 6, unofficial 6-man inside the Phoenix, and they benefit for it.
Oni Fury down to half. Leviathans the aggressors, as a lot of the Bolts haven't reset quite yet. Haddock's taunted in, but still has the beads. He's going to be able to disengage. This is Venenu feeling a little bit more confident now that his relics are up, able to put out solid damage onto Panatom. Leviathans tried to catch the Bolts slipping a little bit there on the resets, but good attention to detail by the Bolts. Fury still stands.
And they should be able to pick it up here. There's no way the Leviathan's going to regroup in time and in numbers enough to take this engagement. Rongyu, Shinto, Yarkor, the only ones in range. Julio crossing through mid. This should go down for free.
Rongyu taunted in by Lasbra, knocked up as well, and Lasbra going to chew through him. 2-0-6 now as he picks up the Leviathan support. Looked like they were all on different pages there, Mifflin. I agree with your assessment that it was going to be difficult to rally the troops in time, but Rongyu went in anyways, finds his 3rd death of the contest.
Hey, it's okay, man. Rongyu's level 13. He's already back alive, essentially. 15 seconds left on the respawn and a global ultimate available to him. Means that as long as the 4-man core Leviathan stay grouped up, Rongyu should be able to rejoin the fight the very second that the Bolts start up the Fire Giant. But no reason for him to die there. I got to put that out there. There's no reason for him to go in. Even if he does find that 2-man taunt that he was looking for, no one was in range to follow up. Just an uncharacteristic poor engagement from Rongyu, which creates a slight opportunity for the Bolts to look towards fire. And the Leviathans, nowhere to be seen. Shinto too far away. Rongyu not channeling the ultimate, and Yarkor on the left-hand side. This objective should be pretty easy.
Fire down to below half, but they're going to kill Julio instead. Goodbye lead for the Kukulkan. He gets exploded by the Fire Giant. Nice double ultimate there coming from Haddock. And he's not done quite yet. Still surging forward as the rest of the Bolts go back and finish off the objective. Now with Oni waves at their side, they've got it perfectly timed. Sieging up mid with the Oni waves and on this right-hand side as they take down the only tower left standing.
It's just strange engagements again. Why are the Leviathans stepping up the Fire Giant if that's not the call? Yarkor's on the left-hand side. Shinto's not in that engagement. Julio just going way too deep.
On the right side, Phoenix, a foregone conclusion for the Bolts as Julio only about to respawn now. Oni wave has been cleared out in mid by Yarkor, who has hit level 20. Talking about his build path, they were a little bit on the desk and all the changes to the Hunter itemization. Yarkor, undeterred from the previous patch's consistent build. Ornate Arrow could be coming up, but we've also seen some Hunters sell their starter item instead of upgrading it at this point. He's still waiting on enough gold to finish off the Deathbringer, so I imagine that will come first as a priority for Yarkor, who seems to me, Mifflin, to be the last remaining hope for the Leviathans. He's the only one who's level 20, 0-0-1, and should be able to get to a point where he can finish off this Deathbringer before the next siege begins. Got to just hope that Yarkor can waterfall some crits through the team.
And he's going to need to get a little bit lucky here, man. I mean, he is the last remaining hope in that he's really the only one who can shut down some of these frontliners on the side of the Bulls, because the damage output from Shinto has been relatively non-existent. I don't think I've seen him really, truthfully, make use of the base form of the Morgan. Every time we're looking at Shinto and talking about him, it's inside the Changeling. He's not been able to stealth forward and find a priority target. He hasn't been able to utilize this Polynomicon either. The burst potential is just not there right now. The Leviathans have been struggling to take these fights in neutral territory, but they are regrouped on that left side Phoenix. That's the one place they've been able to win out on a team fight. We'll see if they can do it again.
Only level 17 for Shinto on this Morgan. It's worth noting that he has the top player damage on the Leviathans, but certainly has not felt as impactful as we are used to feeling from him. Panatom eats a little bit of damage over the wall as the Bolts know that they can play this nice and slow. They've got plenty of time on this Fire Giant. Everyone has relics up on their side, and there's a Fire Wave pushing on the right-hand side just now, passing the enemy purple buff, so should be reaching the base sooner rather than later as the Bolts try their hand once again at this left side Phoenix. This is where they were rejected earlier on, though ultimately did not amount to much of a comeback for the Leviathans.
The minion wave on the right-hand side already starting to work its way into the base. Seems like to me the Bolts are waiting for that opportunity. The second those fire minions pull the Titan, the second they see someone on the side of the Leviathans go for the defense, that should be where they look to engage. Already, they spot out Shinto on the right-hand side, and here they go. They're in.
Phoenix down to half already. Julio gonna blink in, then jump away, but taunted right back in, and Jake is gonna get the last hit. Left side, Phoenix already gone. Panatom stunned up, still has the beads. He has to use them and jump away. And no one on the Bolts looking worse for wear. Only a Sunder down for Jake, that's it. Last remaining hope, by the way, for Leviathans in Yarkor. Just ulted away, had to because of the pressure from Haddix. And now all three birds are down. And it's only the Titan standing between the Bolts and a Game 2 victory. They're waiting for this mid-wave blink in from Jake. Gets the beads from Yarkor. Nice double taunt, but it's only onto the front line from Rongyu as the Titan gets whittled down to 75%. Lasbra taunted and ulted by Panatom, but it is not enough. The Bolts, despite a catastrophic start for Haddix on the right side of the map, managed to win Game 2 convincingly.
Game 3's on the books, aggro. The Leviathans, they're going to need to clean up a lot here in Game 3. Game 1, that was standard Leviathans. Looked like they woke up on the right side of the bed. Game 2, it just felt like they were a little bit lost, didn't they? Not on the same page around these objectives. Sometimes two members say, all right, we got to defend this gold for you. Well, the other three members aren't there. How are you going to do it? The same thing happens on the Fire Giant. There was only really one flash of the Leviathans we're used to seeing, and it was that left side Phoenix defense. I want to see more of that in Game 3 and less of what we saw in Game 2.
Been a lot of snowballed games so far in this set. We'll see if that continues as we take a quick break and get ready for game number 3.
With my eyes closed. How you gonna lie when you look me in my eyes and you show me a facade? Show me a facade. How you gonna lie when you look me in my eyes and you show me a facade? Show me a facade. You a lie. You a front. You say anything long as you get what you want. Tryna play me like a fool, homie, I am not a clown. It ain't nothing but a game, cause all you do is mess around. Now I'm on the verge of a meltdown. Meltdown. I should've known when I met her back at Midtown, at Dogwood, when I was going through a rough patch, but it's all good. I even told her about the dark times I had in childhood, when we was driving off of I-10 in Kirkwood. Now all that time I never get it back. You wanted that, used to hate when I didn't wanna hang. I noticed that, used to talking about your ex, Jake, with your next Jack. Used to messing with them white boys, now she went black. Wait a minute, guess you went and got yourself a real life. Got yourself some booty shots and lip filler. You just wanna make a rapper beat like Dilla. You ain't nothing nice, radiator, splinters up close. Baby, you a ghost, you a demon, and you should float. Get out the way and just go, and just go, and just float. How you gonna lie when you looking in my eyes and you say you down for the cause, but you really here for the ride? You ain't really feeding no sheep. You're a K9 in disguise. Shoulda never gave you nothing but a funky high five. I know we can't go back in time, but I wish I could rewind and get back all that money that I spent every nickel and dime. Cause you a lie. Oh, you a front. You won't say anything as long as you get what you want. Went and got yourself a new man. It ain't even been a month. I feel sorry for your boo, cause he don't know what he signed up for. Do he? Ooh, yeah, I heard that you met him at the bar, Louis. Hope you don't try to do him like you tried to do me, baby. You a cold-blooded killer like Stu. Cause up close, baby, you a ghost. You a demon, and you should float. Get out the way, and just go, and just go, and just float. Float like a balloon, apple, empty bottle, cork, styrofoam, and most dead bodies. You killing me, homicide. Look at your lying eyes. I should have been better laced, cause I failed too many times. If money the root of evil, and you call yourself a dime, you gotta be penny wise. You gotta be penny wise. Cause up close, baby, you a ghost. You a demon, and you should float. Get out the way, and just go, and just go, and just float.
That's right. Thanks, as always, to Insight Apparel Company for furnishing the jerseys and all the apparel here in Season 8 of the SPL. And Gormeister, we have another Game 3 here this weekend. It's apparently just going to be a weekend of Game 3s, and this one still with the Bolts. The Bolts had a Game 3 yesterday, and I've got one here against the Leviathans. This is a very competitive matchup.
I feel like, offering every now and then we'll throw up, like, the summoning circles on Twitter that will be
right.
the, like, I summon a Game 3.
Too many.
I think that, like, she threw it up so many times, it was just delayed, right? Like, I mean, we've had more Game 3s this week than we had for weeks of play last year at the very beginning of the year. And so it was really good. But this one was a great performance overall by the Bolts, and I think it deserves to go to 3 because of it. They had a much better draft, but we got to see a lot of good plays from Jake, a lot of good saves for Jake from Lasbra as well that really opened things up. And this is something, look, I was kind of harping on Ymir. I was saying, I don't know, like, as much as I love him as a support and as good as I still think he is he first pick worthy? Is he someone that you should be banning out? And I think Jake gave us a very pivotal answer, and yes, you absolutely should be worried about this pick.
Player dependent, absolutely yes. And I think Lasbra had a bit of a standout game here as well, a tough one in game number 1. Didn't find the impact that we're used to seeing on the Circuit, and now over on the Erlong Shen definitely looked a lot better. And that opened up the door, didn't it, for Venenu and Barracuda to weave in the damage as you need your backliners to do. I think the initiation and the space control was just so strong from the Bolts here in game number 2. It gave Venenu, Barracuda, even Lasbra the chance to work in, find those kills. 5-2 and 5 for Ven on this Merlin. And I think that's something, Gore. I mean, we're still so early on here in Season 8. You got Phase 1 playoffs coming up here shortly. Not massive damage numbers for Venenu, but Venenu versus Shinto, specifically with this Merlin pick, I think is something that we got to keep our eyes on in picks and bans of future matchups between these two, because it's a pick that both can play and both want to play. So I think the priority between Ven and Shinto for this pick starts to rise.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see this. I'm also starting to wonder, man, like, not just the fight between Vin and Shinto, but this pick back and forth between Lasbra and Panatom, specifically the Circuit. I'm just going to say that was 2 games in a row. She did not look that good. I'm really starting to get a little more on the fence about her. I think she's had a lot more success in the last couple of weeks, but I would argue now, especially, again, with shell nerfs, there's a lot of jungles that can walk through that door that maybe aren't being looked at, maybe could be on the rise, and something that we need to keep our, like, kind of ear to the ground for. But I'm not sure I'm sold on the Circuit as of right now. To see, I think something tells me she's going to get picked up this game somehow, and if she can have a good performance here, that's going to be able to rectify it. But those were 2 not fantastic games for a Circuit.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. And so you wonder then if you're in the mindset of, all right, let's try to pick this or ban this away from Panatom or Lasbra, or let's just toss it on by the wayside. Hop. Ban there against the Bolts, 43% is that Circuit, so definitely warranting a conversation, but after the games that we've seen from the Circuit, Gore, I agree. maybe leave something to be desired. Raijin and Giannis continue to be the first two banned on out. Fenrir, been a popular ban by the Leviathans so far here this set, and that one will continue to fall down as well. And I think what's important here for the Bolts, and I don't know, maybe it's unfair for me to keep harping on this. I love Zhang Kui. I think it's such a fun pick, but I think keeping Venenu on something a little bit more traditional is just going to be such a boon to the Bolts' cause if they're able to do that here for Game 3.
I kind of hate to agree with it because I want more Zhang Kui in my life, but I do think you're right. Like, he just hasn't... Look, he's played 4 games, and all 4 of them he's lost, right? It's not necessarily been great performances for him from top to bottom, so I think there's a lot of wiggle room that maybe he's going to come through. Maybe there's a spot for him again in the future, but I'm looking in Phase 2. I'm looking way down the line. Here, though, is the problem I think the Bolts are going to have to face, at least immediate problem that they're going to have to face. Tiamat has been banned, I was going to say every single time by the Leviathans. I wonder if they're going to be willing enough to take care of that one. But it's also the first time the Leviathans have been first pick today, and they did it twice yesterday. So I'm excited to see what they're going with, and it's a Sobek.
Yeah, Sobek strong there. Of course, for Rong, you keep that out of the hands of Jake. So many bad. I mean, these two teams really across the board. I think God Pools can not every single player, but definitely in support. Mid lane we've talked about, maybe a little bit in the jungle. Some God Pools tend to line up between these two teams, so it's kind of a fun battle to watch throughout picks and bans. You wonder then where Jake looks to go. We haven't seen much out of the awesome Jake tier or anything like that so far here this year, so maybe sometime over the next few weeks that starts to come to the forefront. But I think another matchup that's been fun, Goran, will continue to be fun through this wave of picks and bans, has been between hi-rez and Julio, a couple newish solo laners here in the SPL, and they've put on an absolute show here between both these two teams.
I think that's a really good place to highlight. First off, Julio got a solo kill at the beginning of last game. He got 4 kills exactly. I think his KD was 4-3-0 in that game. And I'm going to give him a shout out because he needed exactly those 4 kills. He hit his 500th career kill. According to our stats. I'll put the asterisks on there. The things that I could see when I added it up, that was his 500th kill that came through in that game. So really clean for him to be able to pick that up. But that goes to show, I think, a very important lesson, right? I mean, he was 4-3-0. The 3 came a little bit further after the 4, right? Like, I mean, he got a lot of good kills early on, and then just unfortunately was not able to have much else, or much other impact because of the lack of his team presence, really, around him. He did really well early on. Nobody else really did, so unfortunately, he did fall apart. I do think this is going to be a clean game for him, though. That Kukulkan looked really solid, and I like that he's going back to it.
Give him the run back for sure. I agree with your thought process there, Gormizer. Oelix will be the jungler this time for Panatom. We asked for something a little bit different that wasn't the Circuit here, and it is a big pivot, Gore. You got some knockups already to capitalize on, and it could be a strong jungle pick here for the Leviathans, but the Ares is maybe instead what's caught your eye.
Because look, if I had said with no Ymir, no Sobek, where am I sending Jake next? I was going to jump to Fafnir. We got to see a lot of him earlier this week, and he just kind of disappeared. Ares was not on my list of supports that I was expecting here. That being said, and I'll double check myself on this before I say it, I know that Jake does have, I think, a pretty decent track record with the Ares as a whole. Yeah, he's 3 for 3 this year in Ares games. And so as far as that goes, I mean, like, you get a 100% win rate, granted, again, only over 3 games. This is looking pretty good, and that cripple's really effective against, as of right now, everybody on the Leviathans.
Yep, especially Sobek there in lane, going to be difficult to lane against. I mean, you look at Chiron and Ares, a couple picks that feel good against this Sobek, and keeping Rongyu in check in lane is so important, so giving yourself the ability to do that, definitely very strong here for the Bolts. Guan Yu saw tons of pick priority at the beginning of Season 8, has continued to see some priority, falls a little bit down now maybe on the chart score, but still in a position where hi-rez will be able to make an impact.
Yeah, and I at this point, I'm honestly on board to give hi-rez anything and everything. If he wants to play it, I don't care what it is. I don't care how long or how successful it's been. Just put him over there. Because, again, he's been very successful in it. And, oh, no, now I have to delete a thing, Dave. I have to go through. Hell has been the only god that was banned and not picked this entire year. I was so excited about that because I wanted the list to dwindle. Well, no. There's still plenty of other gods. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
But she was the
I was
only
gonna
one
say.
who was. She was banned, but she has never been played, despite all of that. But now I have to go mark her off that list. I don't like that.
Is the list short enough where you can rattle off all the names, or is it just way too long, though?
Gods that aren't played? Look, I mean, it's not going to take that much time, but it is going to be more information than some people would like. It's 33 gods. All right, you ready?
All right.
Agni,
go ahead.
AMC,
This is Pokey
Apwash,
rap.
Amaterasu, Anubis, Arachne, Baba Yaga, Bakasura, Baron Samedi, Bastet, Bologna, Chak, Cthulhu, Iset, Freya, Hades, Hebo, Izanami, Jormungandr, Kali, Kumbhakarna, Mulan, Nox, Nuwa, Odin, Oleron, Pele, Skadi, Sylvanas, Thoth, Vamana, Vulcan, Zeus. Those are all 33.
There you go, Gorbachev.
Yeah, 33 gods that are not. They've neither been banned nor picked. Hell was the last one who had not been picked but was banned at some point. So we've got this weird topsy-turvy
Gotcha, all right.
list going on.
You have plenty of columns. Well, Gore, if we ever do like a, maybe we have, and I'm gonna get some flack for this. We ever done like a god rap, like a pokey rap style, like like that type of thing? Well, if we haven't, I think you should be the one to write it after the performance we just had there. I saw Gaga in the
I do
background.
like the poke rap.
Confused,
Like,
wondering
no
what her
joke.
dad was up to there. The final lock-in here, Erlang Shen for the Bolts. Look, Lasbro had a good game on it there in game number 2. Why not give him a chance to capitalize yet again here in a pivotal game 3? Remember, all these very important. You want to be in the top 3 of this group, and the Bolts are going to be able to put a great foot forward. Leviathans as well. Important game 3.
I'm really excited to watch this one. I think the Guan Yu is going to be a good pickup. Hell is a little bit of a wild card because the healing nerfs, we haven't gotten to see how exactly they affect her because she's been gone for 6 months that we've really been able to see. I'm excited to see how this is going to go there for Shinto. But Erlang Shen, Ares, the Erlang Shen saved Ymir a lot of times early on. Ares is a really good pickup into this draft. That cleanse is going to be crucial from the Hell.
The Olympus Bolts love their game 3s, and we got another one here. Agro and Mifflin will take us in.
Thank you, Gore and Sheldon. Sorry, Dave. You guys are just so synonymous with one another that I get you mixed up sometimes. Game 3 coming at you between the Leviathans and the Bolts. And Miff, it has been 2 fairly quickly paced games, at least through the early, usually with one jungler heavily outpacing the other. But this time, Panatom is on one of his signatures in the Awilish.
And both junglers playing very early game centric gods here. Awilish generally hits her power spike around level 6 and then becomes a nigh unstoppable force on the battleground until about level 11-12 once that second relic gets available. Then Awilish has a slight fall off unless your name's Sanford Soccer and then for some reason you're a late game hyper carry on that god. And then Lasbro on the Erlang Shen, we saw it last game. Well, hopefully, if you're a Bolts fan, we'll see it in Game 3. Is just a force to be reckoned with throughout the early. Picks up the blink, does Lasbro, so should be able to get involved pretty early on. But it does leave him exposed. Any knock-up, Gravity Surge could spell his death.
And lots of lack of CC immunity on the other side between Erlang Shen and Merlin. So I think that already you're looking for Panatom to have an explosive game. But how about Shinto on this Hell? We're talking, after game 2 about how neither of us really a fan of the Morrigan for him. He goes back to an old tried and true for himself. This was one of his signature picks before he made it up into the SPL. Dominated the SCC level with this pick and then played it very well at the SPL level last year whenever he came up. But we haven't seen any Hell so far at all in Season 8. This is her debut.
So I'm going to hold my thoughts on it a little bit. We'll hold our reservations here until Shinto can show us what he's capable of. But I think that it does certainly fit his play style much better. He can play that hang back style, poke from a range with that first ability, utilize the healing to elongate these fights around Gold Furies, around Fire Giant, and it just kind of dictates the builds that the Bolts are going to go for. Expect to see some Pestilences get picked up, Brother's Beat Stick likely going to be looked at as well. Wouldn't be overly surprised if Barracuda goes for something like the Toxic Blade, since it seems like he's going for this new age ADC build as well.
Julio in trouble. Beads just late. Needed those to land. And I think Julio's got nowhere to go. Eventually, Haddix's cooldowns will come back up. But it's Lasbro who gets first blood with an early gank on the solo lane.
And that's so different for Lasbro. Normally, he's over here in the duo lane, getting ready for the red and purple buff invades. So, it is a distinct shift here. Julio going to suffer in the early, but this does open up the Leviathans. And I think it's the first time this set to get their second rotation of buffs Unless Ben's got something to say about it.
He's going to eat a knockup, but that's really about it. Featherstep not primed for the maximum amount of damage, but Panatom has bought enough space and enough time for that red buff invade to go their way. Bolts now in trouble potentially of losing their purple as well. Shinto's heading back mid, but with lane pressure in the Leviathan's favor, Panatom goes 2 for 2 on the buff invades.
They do, but are they able to make it out? Jake stops the back. Panatom caught out, surrounded by 3. Gets the jump over the Vine Wall. Season 8 tossing a hand his way, but the Blink Forge and spells doom.
Venenu right on time as well. Lasbro with both early kills, and when I introduced the game to, one jungler has often got pretty far ahead and the other one is lagged behind, to have Lasbro start off 2-0 is important. And look at this, Rongyu and Yarkor, bit of a lazy back, not realizing that they could get pinched from underneath. Chains are good from Jake, and Rongyu is cooked by the Ares. Jake puts himself on the board.
That is a tough start for the Leviathans here. 3 kills for the Bolts in as many minutes. And already it's keeping the pressure up. Julio still level 4. Might get sold out here.
He got soloed. The rookie-on-rookie violence continues. Haddix gets the better end, but now Panatom looking to get it back. Haddix is completely out of mana. Panatom just 1 auto short of being able to get it done. Good beads coming from Haddix there.
Man, the Bolts, what do they used to say? They hit the Jets here in game 3. 4-0, 4 minutes. We'll see if they can maintain this pace as Panatom getting caught out here. Lazarus looking to put the 5th on the board. Beads used, but Julio's there with the peel.
Just shy of getting that turtle form knockup. Still gets the beads and forces Panatom back, so not all bad, certainly, from Lasbro, who might meet up with Shinto and Rongyu, but take some good pathing away from them. 4-0, but only about 1,000 gold leads so far for the Bolts. They haven't been able to translate it into the objectives quite yet, but feel like it might just be only a matter of time until that occurs.
But look at the experience, aggro. Barracuda just now ticking over to 5 off that wave. Yarkor already 5 and had the whole wave to himself. Shinto has been level 6. Ben just now getting there as well. Experience isn't as bad as it could be. Gold, sure, 1,000 gold in favor of the Bulls, but that's not too bad 5 minutes into the game.
Rongyu gets triple chained, and he's going to eat damage. Still has his dash available, so he'll be A-okay. Not enough damage to kill him before that goes off. As soon as you get those tank boots up against the Ares, you feel a lot safer in these engagements, as all of his damage is dot-based, and tank boots still pretty good against dots, but also just better against everything else. So you're feeling pretty good about those one way or the other. And for all the noise, every lane has been affected for the Leviathans negatively, except for Shinto on this hell, and I think a lot would argue that that's the most important one to stay squeaky clean.
Legit. Did you see that chart? The Leviathans are ahead in experience. Sure, it's like 100, so it's a wave that's separating these two teams, but 4-0 are the Bolts. That's first blood. We're 5 minutes in, and somehow gold's less than 1,000. Separating these two teams, experience is even or leaning in favor of the Order side. The Bolts have been putting a lot of emphasis on finding these ganks, but sacrificing their own farm to do so. And the Leviathans with this draft, with Shinto been allowed to free farm up level 7 now. Once we get to that late game phase, this hell could make up for some of this deficit.
Sitting at level 8, tied for the highest in the game alongside Haddix. So the Bolts do have some sustain in order to combat the sustain on the other side. Normally that's the best way to do it, is to just match the sustain more so than try and beat it outright. And Guan Yu definitely can match sustain with anybody, hell included. Once this god gets rolling in the team fights, it is hard to stop. And Haddix likely to go for the typical build, Breastplate of Valor next in order to boost up that mana pool. Rongyu down into the Lurking in the Waters, forced that way by Jake's aggression. Jake has been aggressive so far on this Ares, and he's looking for more. He's going to pull one, he's going to try to at least, and it's Shinto, who has the cleanse available, doesn't use the beads, doesn't panic. Jake doesn't get a lot for that ultimate.
Yeah, this Ares was picked up directly to counter out this Awilish, and the hell was done for the same reason into the Ares. Rongyu trying to get aggressive, finds the tail whip, forces the beads off of Ben.
Cleansed there by Shinto, but the hails are not coming through in time. Venenu gonna add another one, and Haddix has arrived to the mid lane, but so has Julio. Double knockup underneath this tier 1 tower. and Jake gonna have to limp away. 5 kills now for the Bolts, 0 for the Leviathans, but Venenu did expend the Purification Beads.
But as did Shinto on this hell. Now both mid laners going to be left exposed to further ganks. One, at least, still has the cleanse available to deal with the more telegraphed CC. Jake going to have a very hard time finding the no escape ultimate onto Shinto at any point inside this match. But the Bolts really are doing a great job dictating the pace of this one. Now closer to 1,500 gold in the lead. They're starting to hit a couple of their power spikes. Barracuda about to finish off that Transcendence. But the Crouching Tiger on the side of the Leviathans is Yarkor. Already has the Transcendence finished and nearly fully stacked up. Has a slight level lead over Barracuda as well. And Yarkor is a player that can change the face of this match if he decides to rotate out. He's not a hunter that really likes doing that too often. Instead, much more likely to take the 1v1 inside lane. But this on her really could put a wrench in the works with this aggressive style of the Bolts.
So, Mifflin, if Yarkor is the Crouching Tiger, who is the Hidden Dragon on the Leviathans?
Well, maybe Hell, I guess, if we have to keep the analogy running. Didn't think we were going to go too much further into it, but, you know, the Hidden Dragon is, I mean, it's not even hidden. Hell's kind of a telegraph threat, right? The ticking time bomb of Smite 20 minutes in can't really match that sustain. Wish you didn't ask me that, Aggro. I'm kind of floundering out here.
Oh, okay. So would you rather me have gone with he's not a Crouching Tiger, he's a Crouching Lion?
Oh, man.
Because those were your options. Those were your options, and I thought...
You went with the better one.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, make sure you put some respect, so because you never know what you could be getting instead. That's all I got to say about that. Julio knows that he might be in trouble of losing this blue buff, and indeed he is, even with his ultimate. Not enough to confirm it. Haddock's going to be able to snag that one away. But despite the 0-2 scoreline, Julio has been able to stay fairly close, both in net worth and experience. He's only down about 200 gold in this lane.
Not too bad for him, and it's because Haddox has been getting a little bit more proactive on his rotations. He left behind a wave last time, so Julio cleared it out, put it into the tower, and then started his own rotation. But Lazra spots out that Julio's doing all right, doesn't like it, rotates in, blinks forward, 9 turns Blessing, and the cavalry charge, but wouldn't be able to tell it from the HP bar. Julio looking just fine.
Yeah, I think the Bolts were thinking, okay, he doesn't have ultimate. You know, we're feeling good. He's got beads, but that shouldn't matter too much. And then they realized how little damage Julio was taking underneath that tower and decided to turn around and give it up. But still get the beads, so not all bad. Still does cost them a couple of ultimates in order to do so. And now it might be this right-hand side that's in trouble. Rongyu does find a tail whip, but no gravity surge from Panatom as the collapse is on for the Croc. Venenu going to meet up with Panatom, trade some damage each other's way, but Venenu's still feeling pretty good. Rongyu does not. No lurking in the waters means there is truly no escape from Jake's ult.
And that's the Leviathans getting aggressive on the Bolt side of the map, seeing if maybe they could strip away some back camps or find someone lingering, but it just felt like misplaced aggression. Why are you going deep onto the Bolt side when you're already at a deficit, when they've got this early game composition that are looking to fight at this phase of the game? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but 11 minutes in, I don't want to step up into an Ares or an Erlang Shen, especially on their side of the map. Now the Bolts making use of this time, looking towards the Pyro. It's up to Julio to stop it.
Panatom's here, and he still has his ultimate. Haddock's going to hop on the horse right away just to force Panatom back. Julio as well, and the Bolts do step up to secure that Pyromancer. But the Leviathans are surging, looking for a little bit more damage. They know Jake doesn't have his ultimate, and Jake has been isolated. Knockup pulls in Haddock's, but I don't know if that's the target Panatom wanted. Meanwhile, Shinto is just soloing out Venenu, and he gets the kill by himself. Haddock's now on his last legs, and Shinto going to turn around and pick up the double. Leviathan's first 2 kills on the board couldn't have been on a better target.
Now Shinto going to have a much easier time scaling into mid to late game, and now the Leviathans grouped up on the right-hand side with 2 dead on the side of the Bolt should be able to strip away this tower and the blue buff once it respawns as well. Fantastic swing for the Order side team, and it's hard to call it too much of a swing because somehow, despite the odds, despite the circumstances, the game has remained largely even for the most part. Leviathans equalize it yet again. We are talking about less than 1,000 gold and less than 200 experience separating these two squads 12 minutes in, despite the continued efforts of the Bolts. And So far, the Bolts have been doing great. Every single time they get aggressive, they find a kill, they find bees, they get some pressure, they look at the pyro, but it has not been enough to separate them from the pack.
Not quite yet. The only real separation is in XP in a couple different ways. Panatom pretty significantly down to Lasbra. He's down nearly 2 full levels. Imagine Lasbra will be hitting level 12 shortly, as Panatom just hit level 10. But Shinto now level 14, the highest level in the game. He's gone for the defense. He went Breastplate of Valor, third item, just leaning in on that base damage for the Hell, trying to get some extra survivability.
And that additional CDR, just making sure that those heals are always available, always keeping his teammates topped off. I imagine we see both these teams sort of move their eyes over to the left-hand side pretty soon. Gold Fury available, Pyromancer dead already, means that it's really only, or the only rather, POI on the map. Barracuda forced out, Desert Fury expended, but the team fight
big
going the way
fight.
of the Bolts.
And Panatom's already gone. Shinto goes alongside him. Relics did not make a difference for the Leviathans mid laner, both on cooldown now, as he's got to watch as the Bolts take away whatever they want from the map, and they're starting with the Gold Fury. Great engage coming from Jake and Lasbra. Looks like Lasbra just blinked in and found a multi-man taunt. Shinto and Panatom erased before they could get any buttons off.
Man, a lot of people say Smite's about the macro game. It's about the strategy. It's not team deathmatch. But the Bolts are making an argument to the contrary, aren't they? They are consistently looking for that aggression. It seems like objectives are the afterthought here. And so far, it's been working out for them. The Leviathans lose out on the fight and the Gold Fury as well. And now we're starting to see the largest separation of the match so far. 3,000 gold in favor of the Bolts, but not much left on the map for them to contend over in the near future. Pyroman's going to be coming up very soon, but until then, we might just see them spin their wheels or maybe potentially look towards his tier 1 and mid.
Lasbra continues to have himself an incredible game. 3-0-4. The only kill he's missed out on was Haddock's solo kill on the right-hand side. Otherwise, every single kill is gone with Lasbra's hand involved. And that's been the story so far this set, Mifflin, is which jungler falters a little bit and which one steps up. It was Panatom who stepped up, definitely made the difference in game 1, but games 2 and 3, so far at least, it's been Lasbra.
And he's already picked up the Toxic Blade inside the field to contend with. Some of that healing coming through from the Leviathans. Divine Ruin picked up as well. There's so much anti-heal already on the side of the Olympus Bolts, and that's without Pestilence getting picked up. They do also get the Ankh, so the Leviathan's greatest asset being their ability to sustain up throughout these fights has already been hamstrung by the Bolts.
Mid tier 1 down to half on the Leviathan side of the map, and the Bolts are now grouped as 5, looking to make that half a full 0. But blink in from Rongyu, pull back in. It's awesome Jake, but he's got the purification bead still about half HP. Yarkor's ultimate doesn't find a lot of purchase, but Barracuda's does. He knocks an arrow and takes down Panatom, and a big pull coming for Awesome Jake. Takes down Rongyu. Now 2 members down on the side of the Leviathans and 5 healthy members of the Bolts marching on towards the Fire Giant.
The Bolts woke up. They woke up in game 3, man. It is decisive play, isn't it? They're just walking into the tower. All right, we win this fight. And then they do. They take a fight inside the enemy red buff, back up to the Gold Free. Now, Fire Giant, 15 minutes in. Again, this is incredibly early for a Smite match, is being looked at. Julio, the only one in range to defend, and he thinks better of it. Level 14 Kakulin doesn't really stand a chance up against the 5 members of the Bolts. 5 members have it, and there's still 5 towers left to pick up. Those 5 gold caches on the map. The Leviathans going to struggle on the defense.
Yeah, there's plenty of gold to find here for the Bolts. And the Leviathans left wanting. Again, these Willix ults just keep pulling in tank Smith, and that's not who you want, at least in the 5-on-5 groupings.
No, it's not. And who else has he really been able to pull so far? I mean, we saw him pull in Barracuda once, and man's just walked away. It hasn't been easy for him. So far, the Leviathans have not been able to make use of this signature Sobek, a wheelish combo. And it's because no one really else on the side of the Leviathans is burning beads. Julio can't get out there and burn beads. Shinto has no CC in his kit besides the slow, and Yarkor has just been inside the long lane. I mean, my man has not been a part of a team fight elsewhere as of yet. So anytime someone does get tail whip gravity surge, well, the CC immunity's there. The Olympus Bolts are under no threat to their relics.
They're all up still, pretty much. I mean, Venenu still has everything. Lasbra still has everything. Haddix has everything. It's really only Jake that's a little bit vulnerable, and Bera, but 30 seconds only on that cooldown. Now, on the other side, it is worth noting the Leviathans are in a similar position. Shinto still has all of his relics. Yarkor is getting his beads back in 35. But it hasn't really gone out working out so far. Now, this is risky. Blink in from Rongyu, but Jake was ready with that ultimate. His beads weren't up, so really good use of that ult, but Rongyu gets cleansed out from the no escape. No problem there for the support for the Leviathans. Ultimates traded by those supports, I suppose, should favor the Leviathans. That no escape has put some decent pressure on the #1 seed.
It has so far. Now the Bolts in a position to either go into tier 2
no,
or just
Mifflin,
find
they
some
walked into
picks.
traffic. They walked directly into traffic. Immediately, Lasbra, no hesitation, right there with it. Nice pull in from Panatom. Does get the beads from Lasbra off of that gravity surge over the wall, but the Bolts have just been led straight to where they wanted to be. They take down the tier 2 tower, and now they're looking at the Phoenix 4v5 in the Bolts' favor. Julio gets chained up. Phoenix down to about half HP. Big knockup, and Barracuda eats some spears, courtesy of Yarkor. Barra get up to cancel the ultimate and dash away, and it looks like the Leviathans have successfully defended their mid-Phoenix.
Bro, what happened to the Leviathans, man? These guys are gamers. They should have the experience with Frogger to not just walk into the oncoming. The Bolts given over for free here. Tier 2 tower falls, tier 1 as well, and now back up to the Gold Fury. The Leviathans, they've fallen asleep here in Game 3. This is a completely different look at them. Back in Game 1, they were looking strong. They were playing concisely. It was decisive how they were approaching these team fights. But now, as the set has gone on, I mean, these guys ran out of stamina, it felt like.
Yeah, the Bolts have really just withered them away in these fights. That sustain coming from the Guan has been fantastic. And for the hesitation that you mentioned, the Leviathans, the Bolts have really shown the exact opposite. Decisive engages, almost always centered around Lasbra. But Venenu's been on point. Look at the player damage charts. But he's got 10k so far in this game. No one else even at 8,000 damage. This Merlin pick for Ven has started to look very, very strong in the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, strong enough to the point that I'd say, my man is a Merlin specialist. Let's not let this pick fall over to him anymore. He has consistently been topping the damage charts. He has been consistently finding damage output onto priority targets. This is one of the more aggressive Merlin playstyles that you'll see inside the league. This dude is using Flicker to move forward, and that's all I gotta say. Not many other mid laners inside the SPL are doing the exact same. But Ven is a player that is very willing to put himself in danger to make sure that the team fight goes the way of his team.
Here we go, last tower on the map. Fire Giant is off of the Bolts, so this is not as easy as it might seem, but look at Lasbra's positioning coming around the back. He has been spotted by a sentry ward, and the Bolts not looking to force this too hard. No beads for Lasbra, though he has picked up a Magi's cloak, so has a form of CC immunity with that bubble. Bolts really just poking and prodding at that last tower on the map, seeing if it was worth their time before the Fire Giant spawned. Instead, they've set a trap.
Oh my
Panatom
God.
looks for a knock-up over the wall, but it's not enough. Julio, on the way out, takes a good third of his HP in poke, though does have that hell to help sustain him up.
Man, Julio thought about he got thought policed right there. He was like, maybe I step up to the Fire Giant, and he loses out on half of his HP bar for merely having the whimsical thought that he could step in there, and it might just happen again. He's the only one
Haddix
forward.
going in. Shinto gonna cleanse out that stun. Big knockup coming from Julio, and Haddix has been separated with the gravity surge, but
Huge
Jake
ult.
is here with a big ult, but plenty of CC immunity in the reserves for the Leviathans. No one gets pulled, but the Leviathans are lower than their counterparts. Lots of purification beads on cooldown, Shinto and Yarkor included, as the Bolts head back to the pit. Leviathans not dissuaded, though. FG down to about half as Julio blinks in to get HP information. It instantly gets sent packing. Venenu gonna be able to burn him down, and Lasbra charges on in. Shinto's Aegis only delays the inevitable. Rampaging is the jungler for the Bolts, but Panatom finally puts an end to it. But the Bolts might just be putting an end to this set up against the Leviathans. Now it's just Panatom left standing, Lasbra, the only one on the respawn for the Bolts, and the Bolts not concerned with the Fire Giant. They are looking to take game 1 up against the #1 seed here on the group stage.
Hey, you might as well call it now, Aggro. I mean, what's Panatom gonna do? Man's got Brawler's Beatstick and Tier 1 Mace as far as his damage output goes. 8 seconds left on Julio, so he should be able to rejoin his teammate on the defense, but this is a long shot. The Olympus Bolts have it all in their favor. But are they backing up? Oh, all right. Oh, okay. Discipline.
I'm surprised.
That's discipline. Yeah. Get the Fire Giant. Good stuff, guys.
I am surprised. The Bolts leave the door open here against the Leviathans. I don't know if that end was a slam dunk, but I liked their odds, to say the least. I agree with your assessment. They're going with the more conservative route. In fact, very, very patiently waiting for this Fire Giant. They thought about even doing Pyromancer first, but they decided not to in the end. FG being burned as Jake trying to zone, but Jake might be paying for it with his life. He's got a no escape coming. Fire is confirmed by the Bolts as Jake
still alive?
Now in some trouble, still alive, and coming to the rescue is the rest of the squad. Jake waddles away, still about half HP on this Ares, as 5 members of the Bolts now have the FG.
Let that just microcosm of a play there act as an identifier and why I thought this game was over, Aggro. Jake got to have the ire of 4 members of the Leviathans solely on him for what felt like about 5 or 6 seconds, and he just walked out. He just did not die. That is how tanky and how far ahead the Olympus Bolts are right now. 10,000 gold, Fire Giant on 5, Mid-Phoenix down. This is a 99%er in favor of the Chaos team here, but the Leviathans still do have a couple of things that keep them afloat. They still can utilize the sustain from Hell to match up the HP 5 afforded by Fire Giant, but even then, it's been so hard to come by. The anti-heal from the Olympus Bolts is stifling between the Ankh, between the itemization, with the Pestilence, the Toxic Blades, the Divine Ruins. It feels like the Shinto has not been really allowed to utilize his pick.
He's been on the run all game. Remember, he started this game out 2-0, and you thought that the Leviathans might be able to ride that wave to a Game 3 victory, but it has not been the case. Bolts now starting their siege. Haddox pushing up the mid fire wave. Right side tier 2 does still stand, and that makes a difference when it comes to going for the Titan if it is an edge case call. And it's free gold on the map, but the Bolts more interested in getting this left side Phoenix down. Blink in from Julio. 2-man knockup. Jake gets pulled in, and Vera on the run already. Lasbra boost beads alert as he goes in, but Julio is just getting eaten alive on the back end, and he goes right into the waiting arms of Jake, who burns him up. Panatom goes down, but the dual lane of the Bolts has fallen. Both Jake and Vera on the respawn. That means this left side Phoenix siege could take a little bit longer. No Hunter with which to take it down, and the Bolts still not dissuaded. They have their healer in Haddox, still standing strong, but Shinto doing the same on the other side for the Leviathans.
That whole fight goes south when Lazarus laid on the beads. It separates the engagement into a 2v2 and a 3v3 in the back. That's the only way the Leviathans are going to fight in. Huge impale changes the engagement. Haddox has to run.
He's got to back it up, but Yarkor may have just done enough. Look at Lasbra still lurking. Fire minions are on the Titan, but Julio's up in 10. Leviathans don't want to let this go. They feel like this might be their best opportunity, but the Bolts pull back enough. When it's all said and done, though, Mifflin, this Fire Giant does not amount to much for the Olympus Bolts, and that's why going for the left side Phoenix without clearing out that right side tower is a risk. Now, the Leviathans have not lost anything. They've regained their mid Phoenix, and the Bolts are not particularly stronger for it.
And as the clock ticks onward, the gold deficit means less and less, man. This is why I was talking about going for the end earlier. May have been slightly risky, but that was the best advantage state that the Bolts had been in at all this game. You can say, though, that that team fight only goes bad because of the boomer beads from Lasbra. Not the biggest deal. Easy to fix that one up going forward, but it has slowed down their push. Leviathans, now all 3 birds available to them, should be able to step up to this Fire Giant and put up a defense 5 versus 5. Still a long shot, though. The Bolts have won every single engagement inside the right side jungle.
Gotta say, I've loved the way Yarkor has played on her in this game. He is just free-firing that ultimate to start off the fight and chunking Barracuda down to half HP basically by himself. at the beginning of these engagements. Chiron has a dash, sure, but you don't have a lot of lateral mobility in it, and you're going to eat 5 to 6 spears on the way out, and Yarkor has made that look good basically every fight.
It has. Take a peek at the positioning. The Bolts already establishing the defensive around the Fire Giant, and the Leviathans grouped up as 4 rather, with Yarkor on the left-hand side, just dealing with these waves. Seems like it is going to be a tried and true 5-on-5 engagement inside the Fire Giant pit. Neither team really has the greatest confirmation, or secure rather, for the objective itself, so it could be that we see the Leviathans just step up and attempt to end the Fire Giant from a range. So attempt the steal and then disengage. I think that's their best shot. In a tried and true fight, they still got to favor the Bolts.
Man, for how one-sided this game looked for the vast majority of it, you look at the state of the game now, all 3 Phoenixes up for the Leviathans. They've got towers to take down for sure. They are in this one. One clean fight could spell a win for the #1 seed, and Lasbra's ultimate just found nothing. Rongyu dashes away right on time, and now 9 turns Blessing on cooldown.
And now the Bolts get a great opportunity to pull the Fire Giant itself. Their engagement takes a hit, so Lasbra going to play further into the back line and just burn down the Fire Giant itself. Julio, first one in.
As he has been all game, he jumps in right into the rage transformation, but that means he doesn't get a knock-up. Jake going to pull in just Rongyu, and that's not enough to change the course of the fight. But how about Lasbra trying to take the 1v1 up against Panatom amidst the squad? Yarkor, good impale onto Haddix, and the back line of the Leviathans is in dire straits. Jake is going to grab them both. It's a double kill for the support, and there is not a lot of damage left for the Leviathans. The Bolts did lose Lasbra, but neither Shinto nor Yarkor up and standing, as the Bolts again forego the fire, this time going for the mid-Phoenix.
Mid-Phoenix weakened from earlier on, never going to come back in full strength. Gravity Surge comes through, finds Barracuda.
And Barra had no relics, but it's not enough to take him down. In fact, it's Panatom who falls to the masterful shot of the Olympus Bolts Hunter, and just like that, the Bolts have shocked the Leviathans. They take the very first set here in the group stage.
What a tough one. Haddock stepping forward, but only prolongs the inevitable. The Titan burns away, but that does not mean the Leviathans are out of it just yet. It is the top 3 from each group that moves on. They're going to have to prove it up against the rest of Group A, but the Bolts get a commanding lead, taking out the favorites of the group.
This Group A is tough, too, Mifflin. I mean, you've got great
Stacked
teams from top to bottom, really in both groups. That's just how the SPL is right now. But I think Group A might be a little bit tougher. And to get a #1 win over the #1 seed, again, each team only plays each other once. The Bolts, theoretically, have just won their hardest game in this group, setting themselves up for great position heading into those Phase 1 playoffs.
And now the Leviathans are kind of put on point. They got to keep their heads on a swivel. Maybe you think that that's a game that they really are like 7-3 favored to win. They're the first seed coming into it. And now they're going to have to take every single match, every single team inside their group incredibly seriously. That's a lot of stress to put on a player losing out on the first set.
Don't forget, the Leviathans just yesterday did end up dropping a game to the Scarabs. This is a team that has been excellent throughout the year so far, but just suffered their second loss of the phase. Throw it over to the analyst desk after a short break to break down what happened in this great set.
where you get action like that only in the SPL, as sponsored by our friends over at Alienware. Thanks again to Alienware for sponsoring us here in Season 8 of the SPL. That's what all of our pro players are playing on, and if you want to play on gear like that, you can grab some as well at smitegame.com/Alienware, and then using code SMITEAW, grab yourself a discount on some of that awesome Alienware gear. So thanks as always to Alienware. Follow them on Twitter and Instagram at Alienware. Gormizer is with me one more time on the desk to break down exactly what it was we just saw. And Gormizer, I don't think there's all that much that's different here from game number 2. I think Jake and Lasbro, the engage, and Haddix as well, that front line just found so much space for the rest of the team to operate.
The thing that was lacking in game number 1, the front line and their ability to operate on a bunch of different space and really create space for the carries was there and existent in games 2 and 3, and this one made it a lot easier for them. At least seemingly, there were a couple of moments where it really looked like it. In fact, I was thinking about it, that defense over on the left, Phoenix, looked like it could have been great Yarkor with a great impale to force them to fall back, but it was a small drop in an otherwise giant ocean of wins for the Bolts. So they didn't really need to stress too much about it. It did slow down their game a little bit, but I think that's not saying too much. This was just absolutely, I mean, a good demonstration, a good show. Lasbra, these Erlong Shin games were phenomenal, and it makes me want to see more of them. Not just from him, but maybe in general. Definitely more from Lasbra. But also, Jake having an Ares in his back pocket like this one, gets the kill from the chain there, and just the presence that he brought. It was so difficult to deal with. I mean, look, literally, every single one of these team fights, he is essential to all of the kills that are happening, or at least most of the kills that are happening at any given time. And that, I think, is just a great showcase you can have, not only for your support, but just for what this Ares can do. I mean, out of nowhere, and then it's their third pick this game.
Jake went 6-1-13 on an Ares? What the world are we living in where that's what's going on here? Jake tweeted after this set concluded, after the win, said, "The Jerry's is just simply too powerful," and I think the viewers and the Leviathans would agree with that one. 17,000 damage on Ares as well. That's higher than everyone on the Leviathans outside of Yarkor. On the Onrun, 32,000 damage. You got to give a little bit of a nod there, too, to Venenu as well. Absolutely operated in the space that was provided to him, and then on the Merlin pick was able to find a lot of that area. And Gore, now with group implications here, it's far from over, right? This is a very good Leviathans team, and all you have to do is be one of the top 3 out of 4. So I struggle to find a world where the Leviathans don't make it out of this group, but they haven't done themselves any favors here, where on the flip side of the coin, the Bolts have gotten off to a great start.
Now, and the way you're looking at this, if you're just reading for Group A specifically, the number 4 is the only number you do not want next to your name for the end of the group stage. And so, again, right now there's only one game played. You got to look at it. Someone is going to be joining between the Titans and the Valkyries. Someone's going to join the Leviathans at 0-1 down there. And, of course, all of next week those games are going to have to play. But you only get one shot to beat each of these teams. And I think it is incredibly, I would argue it's more important for the Bolts to get a win versus the Leviathans than it is for the Leviathans to beat the Bolts. I think the Leviathans will definitely have that there, but the Bolts need a victory like that. I think the Valkyries and the Titans are teams that they're going to be able to conquer with, and it gets to the point where we, like, and this is very early on to start talking about it, but based on what we've seen up to this point, the Bolts could be fighting for what could be the first seed now, because they just beat the Leviathans there, and there's potential for like bye rounds. It affects your placement in playoffs. Like, that's definitely going to be a very good spot for them if they're able to get there, make their lives a lot easier down the line just because of this win.
Absolutely. Placement going into the Phase 1 playoffs is at the pinnacle of importance, and the Bolts have gotten off to a great start in securing that first seed out of Group A. We'll obviously have to see how the rest of these games go, but Barracuda joins our good friend Aggro for the post-game interview.
That's right. I've got fellow backliner alongside me, Barracuda. Barry, congratulations on a big win over the Leviathans. Look, I know you guys demand a lot of Haddix, but did you absolutely make him die for that Totem of Coup in that set? I'm assuming you're saying yes, but unfortunately I cannot hear you saying yes. So I'm going to say Maybe you have to use the other headset mic is what production is telling me. Look, this is what we normally deal with. Lots of, Barra, I have to teach him how to do everything. That's including
Hello?
land auto attacks. Hey, there he is.
Hello?
Barra, welcome
no.
to the interview, man.
Wait,
Thanks
why
so
is
much
it
for
using
joining
this
us.
microphone? I'm so sorry. I don't
Hey,
know what
bro, it
happened.
happens to the best of us. So you were telling me about how Haddix
Uh-huh.
demanded coup from Haddix, and he said, guys, please don't make me get coup. I'll die for it. And you said, get coup or you're kicked. Is that what happened?
We said get Q and we'll probably win the set off of it. So he gladly got Q, knowing he was going to get ganked, and then we won the set off of it. So yeah, Ven's just like a really mean person. I don't know why, but he just abuses his teammates a lot and was just like, hey, you should really get that totem. I don't care if you die for it. We'll win the game. I'll just carry. And yeah, that's what happened.
Hey, man, sometimes the mean streaks get the results. I don't know if he was more abusive to you guys or to the Leviathans today. He did 32,000 damage in the last game. I felt like you were taking a lot of the brunt of the dive there from the squad.
I really didn't like that. I kind of wanted to like free cast that game and pop off, but I kept getting dove in like every team fight. Also, my positioning was not great, I'll be honest, so I kind of made it easy for them. And also, I haven't played a Chiron game this year until like yesterday. Like once Chiron started getting played a lot, I was like spamming Chiron last night in ranked games. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just a horseman, I guess.
Just a sleepy horseman there, I suppose.
Dude, I'm so tired.
Yeah, maybe you were up a little too late playing Chiron on the
No, dude. These stupid antibiotics make me not able to sleep, man. I'm sleeping like 3 hours a night. I was like, please just carry me, team. Dude,
clearly, you've been sleeping too much up until this point. You've been sleeping too much. That must be the case. Barra, you just beat the #1 seed.
Dude, so? I just want to sleep, man. I'd rather lose and get some sleep than beat Leviathans. I mean, we're going to be top 3 anyways. Like,
I was going to say, this is a big win. You set yourselves up in order to succeed in the group, but you're telling me this isn't even a big deal. We shouldn't care about this win at all?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we kind of knew we were going to beat them because we scrimmed them all week, which is pretty fortunate. So we knew exactly what they were going to do on SPL day. And then also, I think we got to watch them like yesterday or the day before. So again, we knew like exactly what they were going to do. And I'm pretty sure this set should have been a 2-0. I think we kind of trolled a bit too much in game 1. And yeah, it should have been 2-0.
All right, well, should have been a 2-0. Ended up being a 2-1. Hey, Barra, maybe you could go take a nap or something, huh?
Dude, I can't sleep, man. I'm just going to be awake forever.
Well, then you could just watch the broadcast with the rest of us. Make sure you stay tuned.
Are we doing a podcast right now, man? I don't even know.
No, sir. That's not the plan. We got a broadcast to keep on going. Thanks for the time, buddy. Congrats on the win. And stay tuned, everybody. Set 2.